can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going round that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth at this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a £5 in a pot and you can go in and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the park's hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. What about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park, narrated by Angela Rayner, says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. And they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed Whack the Rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin empty.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday morning. This is Talk Breakfast. I'm not Alex Phillips, as you can probably see, or indeed hear. I'm Russell Quirk. I'm in for Alex Phillips until 10 o'clock. A packed show, as you would expect. Things to inform you about, things that you can opinionate about. I certainly will be doing that. And there might be some outrage going on, particularly with stories around migrant hotels. 2 or 3 of them, actually. First of all, migrant hotels, 220 of them, by the way, in the UK right now, costing you £3 billion a year. First of all, you've been incensed by the crime statistics that are revealed in the newspapers this morning in terms of the amount of people in those migrant hotels that are committing crime on a very, very frequent basis. You also might be rather outraged and incensed to learn that based on another exclusive this morning in the papers, not content with free hotel rooms and free NHS, free dentistry, a bit of cash, maybe a few pizzas and a mobile phone thrown in here and there, migrants are now resorting to using taxpayer-funded hotels for the set of OnlyFans sex tapes. Yes, I kid you not, that is in the Sunday papers this morning. I will be talking about that, I'm sure, more than once or twice over the next 4 hours. And of course, we'll be talking about Epping, which is the place of my mother's birth. So I have to say, quite close to my heart. You will see that Epping has rather exploded, I have to say, in terms of the protests that are ongoing there because of what seems to be very, very sharp heckles based on local people, local parents that seem to be very, very concerned about the demographic, shall we say, within the Bell Hotel in Epping, the allegations around crimes being committed and how that affects that local community. And of course there has been unrest, so I want to talk about that and rather unpack it to find out exactly what is happening and to see what the police are doing and what their involvement has been insofar as not just policing those protests, but some are saying that they seem to rather have, big inverted commas here, and this is just the allegations that are being made on social media, rather encouraging disquiet between so-called Antifa left-wing agitating thugs and, some would say, just peaceful parents and protesters that are concerned about their area going to the dogs. So we will unpack that. I'd love to hear from you on that issue in particular, actually, because those of you that are involved, those that have been there at the protest, I understand that there is another protest there tonight. And before I go further, I will urge, by the way, that when I talk about these protests and I talk about the fact that there's another one being organised for this evening, we and I very, very much are saying that these protests should go ahead, but also should be peaceful. There should be no aggro, there should be no crime, there should be no criminal damage, there should be no agitation. But you should absolutely, as a member of the public, be able to go along to that hotel if you are concerned about what is happening or seems to be happening with regard to the contingent within that hotel and perhaps the effect that they are having on the local Epping community. You should be able to protest such, shouldn't you? So that seems to be something that we're still just about are allowed to do. Anyway, so lots and lots coming up, not just migrant hotels. I'm also going to have an exclusive, something I've been tipped off about that relates to, again, it's a bit of an Essex flavour, but the C2C rail company, which runs between Southend and Fenchurch Street, now nationalised, and you might be rather perturbed to hear what they are doing with your money. Yes, because of course if a rail line is nationalised, it becomes at the behest of the taxpayer. So therefore there is and should be scrutiny around the money that they are spending. Well, let's see if you agree later on as I reveal what they've just spent a load of money on. Let's see if you agree that it's money well spent. Okay, so all of that coming up and lots more. We'll also be going through the front pages of the papers and diving into 3 or 4 of the stories in those papers that we think are quite interesting. We'll read them all so that you don't have to. But I'm delighted to say that for the first part of this show, I'm joined by Piers Pottinger, who I've not met before, Piers, but your name, because I'm a PR guy and so are you, your name is PR royalty, sir.
Oh, well, it's very kind of you to say that.
There it is. So tell us about the Pottinger link to, well, you founded a rather famous PR firm.
Yes, well, it became the biggest in the country, and at our peak we had over 2,000 employees.
Wow.
And we
I can't think of anything worse.
Well, exactly. But unlike members of this government, I know what it's like to run a business. And we're most famous. My partner, Tim Bell, became Lord Bell, a wonderful man. Sadly, died a couple of years ago. He was most famous for advising Margaret Thatcher, which I also helped him with. And we advised other prime ministers, governments around the world. Our biggest ever client was, in fact, the Pentagon. Wow. Which is rather extraordinary, okay. And that was right in the middle of the Iraq War. And you've
graced us with your presence. I mean,
well,
I feel
delighted to be here.
Very grateful and rather humbled, I have to say.
At all.
Any anecdotes about Thatcher? I mean, she is my absolute hero. That won't surprise anybody to learn, by the way. My absolute hero. Any anecdotes about Thatcher?
Well, she's great. She was a fantastic woman. I adored her, as did Tim. I mean, my goodness me, there was a leader. A real leader.
I think she's rather missed at the moment, don't you?
Absolutely.
I often say to people that we should have taken a lock of her hair and cloned her, because actually about now she'd be probably able to go into Parliament and shake things up somewhat, because I think it's sorely needed, not just with regard to this government, but actually the thing that we used to call the Conservative Party. But anyway, so yeah, she was formidable, wasn't she?
Yes, she was. And when I remember once when the two of us were talking to her, she said, "My goodness me, Piers," she said, "I used to be able to discern you, the two of you, because he was the fat one, you were the thin one. Now you're both fat. You need to look at." Oh yes.
So yeah, so
she was like a kind of formidable aunt.
No messing about with political correctness, it seems.
No, not at all. Very direct speaker, but she listened to advice. What she was really good at was listening to advice and knowing how to use it.
Well, I wish
which is an art in itself.
Yes, I wish our politicians did that, particularly when it comes to the migrant crisis, which of course is something that we rehearse on this station time and time again. Let's talk about these this myriad of migrant hotel stories.
Yeah.
But first of all, let's talk about this sex tape story, which is, I mean, quite unbelievable. I mean, as if salt was not being rubbed in the wounds of the British public enough with regard to the amount of migrants coming over here and staying in these hotels. I think at last count it's something like 32,000 so-called asylum seekers that are in taxpayer funded hotels right now. 220 of those hotels at a cost of £3 billion per annum. It seems to be that according to the Daily Mail and others, that there is what they're calling a migrant hotel sex tape scandal. Here's the headline: Fury as 2 asylum seekers, well, thankfully it was only 2, are found filming an OnlyFans porn video in their taxpayer-funded room. Now, I don't know where to start with this, Piers, really. A, the fact that they're in a taxpayer-funded room, the fact that they see fit to do such a thing in terms of, the distasteful nature of the OnlyFans thing, I suppose, but also, from an economic perspective, these people are supposed to not be allowed to work. Now, it's one thing going out and being a Just Eat or a Deliveroo driver, as has been alleged many are, on the sly, but it seems that they're getting a bit more sophisticated by way of making OnlyFans porn videos, but clearly with us paying for the set. What do we think about this?
Well, they're also, I believe, selling things like hotel vacuum cleaners and toiletries they find in the hotel. I mean, here is a classic example of mismanagement. If you put hundreds of asylum seekers in a hotel, these are people from obviously a different country who are just thrown into this hotel. Who's in charge of them? Who's looking after them?
Some would
Who's monitoring them?
Some would say that they're taking advantage of us, Piers. Do you think?
Well, there's a bit of that, of course. There's a lot of it. But at the same time, given that it's taxpayers' money, someone should be keeping an eye on it. There should be, in each hotel, a couple of people at least who are monitoring what's going on. They should be helping these people to give them advice and try and make sure these things aren't going on. Yeah, mind you, it's not uncommon in certain hotels for people to do rather odd sexual things. I mean, I don't think it's just down to asylum seekers, but at the same time, they are taking advantage.
But clearly pretending to be asylum seekers, as many are. Maybe not all, but many are clearly economic migrants. Come over here and take our gratitude and throw it back in our face on the basis of clearly doing things that perhaps they should not, but particularly when it comes to working when they are not permitted to do so. This is the Metropole Hotel in Blackpool, by the way. Astonished staff, says the Daily Mail, allegedly walked in on a Syrian man with a migrant woman during a room inspection. So, to your point, it looks as though there is some monitoring going on, but we don't know how much and what frequency and what else has been found.
Well, I think they were discovered by hotel staff on a routine room inspection. But the point is, there should be someone, rather like a kind of head prefect, who's actually in charge of and responsible for these people, but there isn't, I don't believe.
I get that, but of course that would be even more expensive. That's £3 billion a year that the taxpayer is currently funding this debacle.
Well, if we're spending that money,
we have to spend it. Well, no, maybe the answer is just not to let them be here in the first place.
Well, that would help, yes.
So the former manager at the hotel, so they've now left, said it was pretty obvious what was happening. The couple were running an illegal porn business from the hotel. The man was naked with just a towel around him when he answered the door. She was wearing sexy lingerie, lying on the bed. What a picture for you at 6:13 on a Sunday morning, everybody. He told us that he was filming it to put it on OnlyFans. Well, he was pretty blatant, really. I mean, he didn't quite have to go that far to admit it. The 18th century Metropole Hotel has been used to house asylum seekers since 2021. I wonder what the bill has been so far, Piers. And is managed by contractors Serco. And look, I say this with all due respect because they're doing nothing wrong, but Serco have got very, very rich indeed off of such things. Not the OnlyFans thing, by the way, but the hotel dynamic. Astonished staff at the Metropole Hotel in Blackpool allegedly walked in on the Syrian man. Migrants are seen on a small... users who make content on OnlyFans can charge others to view their videos and photographs. According to the Home Office, cases of illegal working while migrants are being housed in hotels can lead to their support being cut. Well, I suppose if you're making hundreds and thousands of pounds on a weekly basis from OnlyFans, I don't suppose you'd be that worried about your 46 quid a week being cut. An absolute outrage, Piers, and I wonder how this is multiplied. I mean, not just in terms of the whole OnlyFans thing, but what else is being done in these taxpayer-funded hotel rooms, I wonder.
I've no idea.
Drug dealing, maybe?
Probably. I mean, it's...
Money laundering?
I'm sure. I mean, first of all, if he's doing that for that sex tape for money, he's got to set up a bank account. And I mean, you know, this is not just casual. I'll pick up a tenner here for doing some casual work. This is orchestrated. This is intentional with a capital I. It's absolutely disgraceful. And I mean, I'm personally not surprised there has been disturbance in Essex at the Bell Hotel. I thought I've actually expected that might have happened before now,
Well,
because people are
We don't
angry.
condone it, but as I say, protesting's fine. But obviously, what we don't condone absolutely is any unrest, any criminal activity. But tensions are certainly running high. And just quickly before we move on to matters of a Palestinian nature, there's also in the Daily Mail and again other newspapers as well, an account of the amount of criminal charges that are being levied against asylum seekers. The investigation by the Daily Mail reveals that 312 asylum seekers have been charged with an astonishing 708 alleged criminal offences in the last 3 years. And get this, 18 charges of rape, and these are obviously the ones that we know about, the authorities know about, 35 charges of sexual assault, and 89 charges of assault, including assault on emergency workers, 43 drug offences, and so on. So I think we can wring our hands as much as we do, and as much as certainly some people on the left do, with regard to what we do about this. But again, it comes down to the fact that these people should not be here in the first place, and we wouldn't have to talk about this and put in place mitigating measures. Let's talk about these Palestinian protests before we go to a break and then carry on. The fact that there have now been 100 arrests of late of pro-Palestinian protesters that have been, despite the fact that Palestine Action has been prescribed as a terrorist organisation, these individuals that are pro-Palestinian, some might say simply pro-Hamas, some might say anti-Jewish, have been arrested for seeming to support Palestine Action with placards and certainly some of the things that they are shouting, which are certainly things of a flavour that are anti-Semitic, and some things that I can't repeat on this station. In other words, things that are detrimental to, inverted commas, your Jewish state, from the river to the sea and so on, still being chanted on the streets of Britain. I suppose we should be thankful, Piers, that at least some people are being arrested rather than the whole two-tier thing that was very evident up until recently, where people simply wouldn't be arrested for such. What do you make of this? And what is it about this that these people think that despite the law and despite the fact that the Palestine Action organisation has been prescribed as a terror entity, what do we think about the fact that this continues and continues?
Well, it is. I'm glad to see the arrests, personally. It's about time. But it's not consistent. And I think the problem is that the policing over this issue hasn't been consistent, and it needs to be.
It's been non-existent.
Well, it has. But again, it's inflamed and not helped by a well-known organisation called the BBC, who refuse to call Hamas terrorists. They call them militants. And even their head of news seems to think that there are different kinds of terrorists and refuses herself to call Hamas terrorists, which is what they are.
Yes.
And it is... I mean, if you have a major news organisation basically sympathetic to Hamas, that's the only conclusion you can draw, then it's not surprising that the people are demonstrating ignorance. They're very
going
ignorant.
Back to what we were talking about 10 minutes ago with the late, great Margaret Thatcher, a woman, a politician of conviction, but also of standards and discipline, I would argue. If only we had such politicians around now that actually did have standards, particularly when it comes to controlling our borders, and in particular when it comes to ensuring that our police force does actually police the streets of Britain properly and equitably. Before we go to a break, just a couple of very, very quick texts. Carol says, I've been told for many years that the far left turn up to these protests like the one in Epping, and they are the thugs causing the grief with the police. So the government and the police can say, oh, it's the far right fighting and causing damage, tainting the local ordinary people, making out it's them committing crimes and violence. Quite frankly, I wouldn't put that past the far left or people in charge at all. Well, let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. I'd like to know what you think about everything that we're talking about today, particularly if you have been involved with those Epping protests. They continue this evening, it seems. And again, my caution is, if you go along, be peaceful, please. Otherwise, you'll simply be tainted as far right, and we do not want that happening because, of course, it diminishes the point and the gravity of your protest. We're going to go to a break. This is Talk Breakfast. Back in a couple of minutes.
And I've said, well done to the BBC, because they know they're going to get this
For
backlash.
removing a man's career, you think that's okay?
Look.
His ability to earn a living, Ken.
No, not at all. He will bounce back in other guys. Yeah, this is just one aspect of his overall empire that he's got, and I've got every confidence that he will bounce back. Listen, we've got to hold ourselves responsible for some of our action. I've had to do the same thing. I've had to step down from being in a position of responsibility because I acted inappropriately. I lost my temper.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm Russell Quirk. This is Talk Breakfast at 6:22. Still joined by Piers Pottinger, who's helping me this morning going through the big stories. Love to get your reaction. 0344 499 1000, or of course you can, as ever, text 87222 plus the word talk. We're going to go through the papers now, Piers, but one thing I noticed in the paper, the Telegraph actually earlier on, was this, talking of Palestinian protests. And again, we should be clear. You know, if you believe that there should be a Palestine, then it's fine to say so, and it's fine to protest. Where we, I think, should draw the line, and where the police and the judiciary should draw the line, is when it comes to supporting Hamas or Palestine Action, which are both prescribed terrorist organisations. Or indeed, I would just venture that maybe shouting death to Jews and from the river to the sea, you know, might be a bridge too far, so to speak. And therefore, as you would expect, no matter which political flavour of said chant, those things should not be permitted. So at last we are starting to see the authorities doing something, I guess because Mark Rowley, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, doesn't really have a lot of choice. He doesn't have any wriggle room. I do feel that with Mark Rowley actually in the past, Piers, that you've seen him on television a number of times explaining why they can't do things, why they can't police in the past Black Lives Matter protests, no matter how violent they might be, you know, for all sorts of reasons. But I guess for once the government have rather painted the Met Police into a corner with regard to Palestine Action and Hamas, because they are prescribed terrorist organisations. But listen to this. This happened yesterday. This is being recounted from the Telegraph. A cast member, so one of the actors at the Royal Opera House yesterday, held up a Palestinian flag during the curtain call and was then seen to resist attempts by staff that then came from the left and right hand side of the stage to try and remove it. He wrestled it back and insisted on holding it up. Is that legitimate protest, or is that a bridge too far?
It's a bridge too far, and I'm sure that will be his last curtain call at the Royal Opera House. Of course, it's ridiculous. People are not paying to go and see some lefty lovies joining a bandwagon. This is, again, another problem with Palestine Action. Lots of lefty lovies have spoken out in favour of it. And when you get the likes of Steve Coogan supporting it, and that lot who love to come and support left-wing causes, I believe actors and actresses, I still call them actresses, by the way, they should stick to acting, because I'm not interested in their political views. I'm interested in their performances.
Yes, well, I guess, you know, politicians don't try and act. Well, if they do, it's not very well.
Well, they're failing at the moment.
And when you have the likes of Gary Lineker banging on about what he does, yeah, we presenters, hosts, people in the media and politicians don't try and play football, do we? So yes, horses for courses, but again, everybody has a right to a voice. I think the problem is with some of these influences is that they use their platform, the stage that they have created for themselves. I mean, Gary Lineker is the obvious example, but Emma Thompson, Hugh Grant, I mean, there's lots of them.
Yes.
They use their platform that has been gained through their art, if you like, for political purposes. So it's a little disingenuous, isn't it?
Yeah, but they then speak from a position of ignorance.
Yes.
Because they don't actually know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And they haven't actually, they live in a different world. And if they lived in the real world, as opposed to fantasy, they would understand that a lot of their comments are just ludicrous.
Well, the trouble is, Piers, whether it's our acting profession, sports stars, or indeed, I would argue, our Westminster politicians, they all live in bubbles that are very different to the rest of us.
Yeah.
And that is why I think there's such a disconnect between us ordinary people, voters, and yes, the so-called intelligentsia. Right, let's have a quick look at the front pages. Sunday Express, NHS tourists, shock horror, fleecing our hospitals for £200 million. This is the Sunday Express front page. Foreigners are flying in to scam cash-strapped health service despite a pledge on crackdown, the Sunday Express says. So, as if our NHS was not beleaguered enough, we've got people flying in, having operations, and then flying out again. Why on earth are we allowing that to happen?
Well, exactly. But also, I've thought for years that we're missing a great opportunity because a lot of foreigners also fly in for our private health services, and we should tax them for that. We could charge them per procedure, per consultation. We could raise a lot of money.
We're just asking where they live might be a good start.
But they wouldn't make any... the point is, it wouldn't stop the people coming to use the private health service, and we could generate millions of pounds a year from people coming over and using it.
Indeed.
But no one's ever thought of doing
Talking of generating millions, if not billions of pounds a year, let's talk about what's on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph, which is middle class face higher water bills.
Yes.
I think they've gone up rather a lot as it is. This is low-income customers, though, could be subsidised by better-off households in a national scheme. So this is something that's being trailed, being suggested. I would call this water communism, by the way.
Exactly.
Whereby we have very, very inefficient water services, generally led by chief execs on millions and millions of pounds, with billions and billions of litres of water being leaked into the ground on a daily basis. We now hear that apart from that, and the fact that obviously our water bills increase significantly on a yearly basis, and I think, is it Thames Water that's now just lost £1 billion or something? Absolutely outrageous. Now we hear that the latest idea with regard to our water is that those of us that apparently are from Middle England and on a reasonable wage and are reasonably well off are going to pay higher bills potentially to subsidise so-called low income
Well, this
customers.
is another socialist version
communism,
of, you know, it's like those with the broadest shoulders should pay more tax.
Well,
It's those with the most taps will have to spend the most for pay the most for water.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is just this shows what a mess the water industry's in, but more importantly, it shows the government hasn't got a clue how to sort it out. And
well,
I mean,
but it's ideological. Let's quickly move on because we've got lots and lots and lots to cover. Also on the front page of the Telegraph, pupils, school pupils, are going to be taught that feeling a bit down is not a mental health issue. I mean, go figure. Can we believe that this actually has to be written on the front page of a national newspaper? That if you're a little bit depressed because, I don't know, you got a bad exam result, or, I don't know, you're locked out of your Instagram account and you can't remember your password, that feeling down, feeling a little bit depressed, a bit anxious, is not tantamount to you having a mental health issue where you need some kind of mental health triage at school, or indeed an absence from school. It's absolutely unbelievable, isn't it? Front page of The Sun. Do we care about this? I'm a Celebrity, Harry, get me back in there. This is Jungle King Harry Redknapp is on the brink of signing for I'm a Celebrity. I'm not particularly concerned about that. Piers, are you a big fan?
No.
Okay. And then front page of the Sunday Times. They are leading actually on what we've just been talking about, which is the 100 arrests at a Palestine Action protest yesterday. And also something I do want to talk about later on is this bottom left of the Sunday Times front page, Ryanair staff bag oversized bonus. You know when you go to the airport and you think that you have carried the instructions of, let's say, Ryanair or in fact EasyJet, Wizz Air, whoever, to the letter with regards to what you can or can't take into the cabin with you, only to be stopped as you go through the boarding gate and told that your bag is half an inch too big and it's going to cost you €40. Well, it turns out, according to this article in the Sunday Times, that Ryanair pays bonuses to their staff to catch any of its 200 million passengers who try to travel with so-called oversized cabin luggage. There was a payslip apparently belonging to a former employee that's been seen by the Sunday Times that shows the payment of a, get this, Piers, a gate bag bonus for enforcing the airline's bag size policy. So I suspect on the Ryanair P&L there's a little line at the bottom which is, you know, I don't know, I'm paraphrasing here, but bag stitch up profit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what we've always suspected, but I think it's beyond the pale, isn't it, that people within the Ryanair or indeed any other organisation, airline organisation, should be actually paid an incentive to catch passengers out? Is this right? Do we think that's acceptable?
Well, I think Ryanair is a good example of a company that in many ways is a admirable and an enormously successful and should be respected business. And on the other hand, some of its practices are absolutely appalling, because its maverick boss, Michael O'Leary, doesn't believe in the maxim the customer is always right. He believes that he's right, and he is running a business to make money, which he does. And I'm afraid to say some of his things he's suggested in the past, like standing up and taking the seats out of an aeroplane.
Well, he says that was a myth.
He did, because the backlash was so great.
Or indeed charging to go to the loo. He also says that was something that has never ever been suggested or planned by Ryanair. But I agree completely and totally that businesses, look, I'm a corporate guy, I'm the largest capitalist probably in this building right now. So I get the commercial imperative, but I think what people feel particularly anxious about and disappointed with and upset and angry about is the fact that it seems that airlines do seem to want to catch us out sometimes.
They do.
That's the inference.
They do, but also, to be fair to the airlines, they do keep changing the regulations on cabin baggage.
The EU regulations.
The EU do, which means they, as they all fly through these hubs, have to comply. And that does make it very difficult sometimes. And I think passengers are more confused about the size of hand luggage they can take rather than anything else. I was once on an aeroplane going to Jamaica, where the lady in front of me was stopped on the jetty by one of the cabin crew and said, no, madam, that's not hand luggage, that's a dishwasher.
Okay.
Which he was trying to take on board as hand luggage.
I think the airline may have been correct in that instance. Finally, before we move on and go to a break, the Daily Star, which I'm sure is the newspaper that most of us turn to first thing every morning for information and updates in terms of what is happening in the world. The Daily Star has a picture of Danny Dyer, Senior, because there's two Danny Dyers. There's the father and the daughter, apparently, but this is Danny Dyer from EastEnders fame. The headline is "You Mugs," and it says here, Danny Dyer brands PM non-entity. I think most of us would agree with that, and calls for working class political leaders. Well, I have to say that I wouldn't have said that Danny Dyer was necessarily the political super brain that I do turn to on a regular basis for advice on politics, but he's right here, isn't he, that our politicians should be of a working class flavour. They should be connected to us as a public and an electorate. It goes back to the bubble thing that we were talking about just now. Do we agree?
Yes, well, I mean, even the Labour Party won't use the phrase working class. They keep talking about working people, as if an awful lot of people who are working aren't. I mean, they use this terminology, and it's absurd. But what we would, and as most people in the country think of working class people, I mean, the best of the working class people would make marvellous politicians. I'm quite convinced of that, because they'd be no nonsense, straight down the middle, wouldn't waste money, and actually get things done.
If only. OK, look, Piers Pottinger, thank you very much indeed. You're staying with us. We're going to take a break. This is Talk Breakfast. I'm Russell Quirk. We will be back after this break.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm Russell Quirk. This is Talk Breakfast 6:36 on this Sunday morning. Thank you for joining me. It's nice and early, but of course you must be up and listening, because otherwise you wouldn't hear me saying this. So we are here because indeed you are up, and therefore we are here to serve you. And look, we're going through the papers and the big stories this morning, myself and Piers Pottinger, the PR legend as he is. I want to turn to, and I know we talk about this a lot, but I want to really reinforce a view on this next topic, which is the BBC. The Sun talks today that the BBC is on a final warning, inverted commas, after being rocked by what it says is a triple whammy of scandals. And I think what it's referring to, of course, are the Gaza documentary, the Greg Wallace debacle, in terms of him being alleged to have been inappropriate some 80 times over 20 years, been found culpable, of course, in about half of those instances, now dispensed with. But again, the point being that the BBC seemed to rather sit on its hands during those 2 decades. And of course, I think one of the most heinous things that the BBC has done, certainly this year, although we can go back through previous years and talk about lots and lots of other outrageous and serious things that it is culpable for, but that is the Glastonbury incident. We've heard this week, of course, that there will be no further action taken with regard to some of the things that were said on stage during the BBC's broadcast at Glastonbury that some of us would say amount to hate speech. Of course, Bob Villan said all sorts of very, very inappropriate and hate-filled things on that stage. And that aside for a second, the conduct of the BBC with regard to the fact that Tim Davie, the boss of the BBC, was at Glastonbury during that performance and decided, A, to allow that to go out, and secondly, for 5 hours, that display of disgusting speech and hate speech, which effectively amounts to anti-Semitism in most views, he allowed that to remain on iPlayer for about 5 hours thereafter. So the issue here, I think, with the BBC is that this isn't just a triple whammy of scandals. Of course, in its wake, we have Lineker, goodness knows how many times, in terms of him behaving and speaking inappropriately. And again, nothing to do with his right to free speech, but the fact that he has breached, it seems, his employment contract many times in terms of his rather odd views, in my opinion. And then, of course, we can go back to Hugh Edwards and Jimmy Savile, and so on and so on and so on. And it seems that no matter what happens, no matter what the BBC is involved with, what it oversees, what it turns a blind eye to, that actually the BBC and its employees and its executives get away with everything and anything by way of there being literally no accountability. And this is despite the fact that, of course, this is not just any old organisation. This is an organisation that is paid for by the taxpayer through the licence fee. I have called in the past the licence fee a tax. It is a tax to watch television. And if that were not bad enough in terms of there being no quality control, no impetus, no filter in terms of the people that pay that licence fee seem to be in any way important to the BBC by way of quality of output, we have this absolute hand-wringing, this ostrich-like head in the sand from everybody that seems to work at a high level in the BBC, and actually I would say at government level in terms of ministers, you know, the Cabinet Secretary for Media and Sport, simply allowing the BBC to get away with one debacle after another. It's tantamount, I think, to empowering the bad behaviour of people like Greg Wallace, Hugh Edwards and this Bob Villan character, simply because nobody ever is held to account. There is no scrutiny, there are no consequences. Have we ever heard, Piers, answer me this, genuinely, and you're a man that keeps his ear to the ground, have we ever heard of someone from the BBC at a reasonable level being fired for their negligence or their culpability when it comes to some of these scandals that the BBC is involved with? Have we ever known anyone to be fired?
I mean, I advised the BBC many years ago when Michael Grade, now Lord Grade, was the Director General. Of course, he's now the head of Ofcom, ironically.
Yes, what a
but
wonderful
no,
organisation.
people don't get sacked in the BBC. I mean, the woman in charge of Glastonbury has apparently decided to step back, whatever that means. And so has she been suspended? But it has been, the statement said she has decided to step back, come off it. Of course, it's, in my opinion, if Tim Davie was an honourable man, he should have resigned by now.
Well, Tim, but again,
I can't believe the board supports
Piers,
him.
it's not good enough for people to decide to resign. People should be fired.
I agree.
That is where the accountability should be. So not only should Tim Davie be fired, yes, that is exactly what I'm calling for, because this man is the top of that organisation. What's the old saying? I think it's a bit of a gangster saying, actually, but let's use it because I think it's rather appropriate. The fish rots from the head. Tim Davie, you are the head of the fish. You are the head of the BBC. It is an appalling organisation that has been encouraging, I would say, and certainly complicit in scandal after scandal after scandal on our dime as the licence payer. So not only should Tim Davie be fired, not allowed to resign, be fired, but also surely, and I know this has been called for in the past, but surely the BBC must stand on its own 2 feet financially. The fact that we are rinsed as a licence payer, we are taxed, the money is literally taken from our pockets, we are lifted upside down and shaken for our 170 odd quid a year for output that is appalling, nothing like it was in terms of quality 20 or 30 years ago, but literally debacle after outrage after scandal, week after week, month after month, quarter after quarter, year after year. The only way that we change this by way of the BBC becoming accountable and indeed the quality of output improving, I mean, so God help us, is that they stand on their own 2 feet and become a subscription-only service. If they were a subscription-only service, they would have to increase their quality and they would then stand or fall on the success of that output, wouldn't they? I think the only thing that the BBC should have that is in any way funded by the taxpayer should be one news channel, BBC News, which must therefore be also straight back, no bias, no opinion, no lefty producers twisting and tweaking the narrative. Get rid of everything else that's free, inverted commas, that's paid for by the taxpayer. Everything else should be paid for. And if the public want to pay for Radio 1 or BBC 2 or BBC 5 or BBC 9 or however many BBC channels there are now, which in itself is ridiculous, by the way, then pay for it on a monthly basis. And that way, those people running the BBC will know that they have to sing for their supper. They have to ensure that quality is good. Because otherwise, what you end up with is a failed BBC, which is exactly what we have. And we should stop standing for it. Enough is enough.
But not just domestically, because internationally the BBC used to be respected and admired as a great organisation.
Well, now we're laughed at. Piers, we need to go to a break. We're laughed at.
Yeah, we are
like many other things in what was Great Britain. We'll be back after this.
But if we are able to expand that scheme so that we can send everyone who comes over back, then it won't be worth their trying to come across.
No,
and therefore, there will be no return.
No, but it's not. But that's not the deal. The deal is not let's send them all back and we don't get anything in return. The deal is if we send 50 back, we get 50 coming the other way.
Yes, the deal is a pilot scheme.
How is that? Well, no, it's a pilot scheme. 2, you've said if quite a few times. 3, it's going to cost us a lot more money.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. OK, let me know what you think about my BBC rant. Do you know, I can't remember the last time I watched the BBC, seriously. And it's not just because they continue to flog the dead horse that is Mrs Brown's Boys. It's just because I find that the output is just lacklustre in every respect. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. Are you up and about yet? It's 6:47, so of course on a Sunday morning you should be. Come and join us. 0344 499 1000, or indeed text your message preceded by the word talk to 87222. Let's finish off going through these front pages, Piers. I want to talk about the front of the Daily Mail. This is something that you picked out, actually, that I know you want to wax lyrical about. So, front page of the Mail on Sunday, top Starmer Mandarin's firm is paid for spy ops. OK, is this as sinister as it sounds?
Well, it's quite interesting because Jonathan Powell, who's the man in question, who worked for Tony Blair...
He was his chief of staff.
He was, and very involved in the famous dossier on the Iraq War.
The sexed-up dossier?
The sexed-up dossier. And Jonathan's brother, older brother, Charles, who calls himself Pole, not Powell, advised Margaret Thatcher
is that
and was
posh for Powell,
very close. So they're very opposite politically. But also... Jonathan Powell runs this charity. I don't quite know what charity services they perform, but it's called Intermediate. He also is Britain's national security advisor, and very tellingly, he's not a civil servant, which is the norm for this job. He's a political appointment by Starmer, and Starmer is surrounding himself with Tony Blair aides. He's got Liz Lloyd, who was Jonathan Powell's deputy, who's now... Liz Lloyd is the head of policy. The Mandelson, of course, who's the ambassador in America, which is also, of course, a great friend of Jeffrey Epstein. Mandelson was the last person to have dinner with him on Epstein's last birthday before he was incarcerated.
This all sounds a bit murky, doesn't it? So let me just read what the Mail is saying, just to give some more context to this. So again on the front page, the first few paragraphs of this story, it says one of Keir Starmer's most powerful advisors was last night accused of running secret diplomatic back channels to terrorists, right? Let me just read that again. One of Keir Starmer's most powerful advisors, that's Jonathan Powell, was last night accused of running secret diplomatic back channels to terrorists using his own taxpayer-funded team of outsourced spies and spooks. Jonathan Powell, the Prime Minister's national security advisor, founded the shadowy organisation after he left Tony Blair's Downing Street, where he was chief of staff when the infamous dodgy dossier helped to propel Britain into the war with Iraq. As you say, Piers, the outfit, Intermediate, receives funding from the Foreign Office for making contact with non-state armed groups, so in other words, terrorist organisations, and is understood to have brokered the UK's deal with Syria, which led to the re-establishment of diplomatic relations earlier this month. So We're saying, just to join the dots here, we're saying that the former Chief of Staff to Tony Blair set up an organisation that is part funded by the Foreign Office. Jonathan Powell, by the way, is still an advisor to the current government, but
he's the National Security Advisor, which is a very serious job.
But at the same time, is also involved in a business that makes contact with terrorist organisations for the purposes, of course.
He's no longer. I mean, he was the founder of the business. He's still very much on their website.
Yes,
it's still going.
So he's involved,
so you can't say he's not involved.
Nope.
But also, just before this, he is also the man responsible for handing over the Chagos.
Wow.
He was doing the negotiations. So that's how pro-British Mr. Powell is.
Yes.
I mean,
well, in his defence, he will say, well, of course, look, when it comes to peace and the negotiation of such things across the world, you have to make contact with these organisations.
This is always the answer.
Whatever happened to not negotiating with terrorists, or have I just seen that in films? Is that just a myth?
Well,
clearly we do negotiate with terrorists.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is very anti-British stuff. It's like Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, who made his fortune by representing enemies of Britain, terrorists of either the IRA or Al-Qaeda.
But I'm afraid, Piers, you could also argue that some of our politicians in their lives previously as lawyers, so like Sir Keir Starmer, and this sticks in the throat to say this, but Sir Sadiq Khan, they also earned money from defending such people before they got into politics.
And they also say...
Now they're running the country in London.
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful, isn't it? Right, let's talk about some other stuff here. I want to talk about this story. Anti-Semitic abuse rife in schools, say teachers. This is a survey that's been done, which of 300,000 National Association of Schoolmasters and Union of Women Teachers members, that resoundingly comes back and says that the majority of Jewish teachers, so 51% of Jewish teachers, have experienced anti-Semitism in their schools since May 2023 by pupils. So you've got 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds screaming anti-Semitic abuse at Jewish teachers. What, I wonder, happens to those children? Can I just guess? Nothing.
Yeah, I'm sure nothing. It's very worrying indeed. And I mean, again, it needs to be, parents and teachers need to be very firm about this.
Well, it says also here, this is worrying, a third of respondents to the survey said that they did not feel that they could report anti-Semitism to their employers, through, I guess, fear of escalation and reprisals. What a sad state of affairs, particularly when it seems that, whether it's parents or others, indoctrinating children, presumably, to be anti-Semitic in that fashion. I'm afraid it speaks to the indoctrination of our education. I thought it was just universities that were lefty and warped in Marxism terms, but it turns out that it's our secondary schools, and God hopes not our primary schools, but according to this story here on the front of the Sunday Telegraph, this is something to be a bit concerned about. And then I also want to talk about this, which is, I think, this is my favourite story, I think, of the day so far, Piers. This is on the front of the Sunday Telegraph. It's also elsewhere in the newspapers, and again, we're going through the papers so that you guys don't have to. This is Rachel Reeves' latest wheeze when it comes to trying to fill the gap in her beleaguered economy. Don't believe all this nonsense, by the way, about £22 billion Tory black holes. We've already established from the Office of Budget Responsibility, which is the government's own body, that £22 billion black hole doesn't exist. It's certainly going to exist, though, if we carry on as we have been with regard to our push towards this kind of Marxist utopian economy based on that Marxist ideology that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are peddling by way of high taxes, huge public sector pay rises, massive borrowing and so on. Anyway, the point here, again, front page of the Sunday Telegraph, is that Rachel Reeves has decided that she is going to use the so-called windfall from seized Bitcoin. So in other words, the Bitcoin that has been seized by the police, by way of proceeds of crime, apparently we as a country, the authorities are sitting on as much as £5 billion in Bitcoin that has been seized, which I guess now is, well, actually the taxpayers, I would argue. And so what Rachel Reeves is going to do is to nick it. She's going to take the £5 billion and use it to plug her hole in her hapless economy. Bitcoin's value, by the way, Piers, has now hit $123,000 per coin. Some of the money that we have sitting there, because it's gone up so much, is now worth 20 times what it was before these Bitcoin hauls were seized. Should Rachel Reeves be using this seized money, our money, on shoring up her hapless economy? Or I would suggest that £5 billion should perhaps instead be spent on, I don't know, policing, building jails, reducing taxation. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Doing sensible common sense things rather than just carrying on regardless and spending money, watching these gaps, these black holes get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then thinking, okay, well, there is some seized illegal Bitcoin that I can probably get my hands on. I mean, what next? I guess that gangsters' cars, you know, gold bullion. I mean, you mentioned earlier on.
Well, I mean, I think with the Bitcoin, she could get Kenneth Noye to fence it for her, couldn't she?
Wow.
And, you know, turn it into cash quickly. One of the difficulties with Bitcoin is trying to turn it into the cash it's claimed to be worth. So, again, I take this with a pinch of salt. But if you remember, Gordon Brown, when he was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, succeeded in selling Britain's gold reserves at the lowest point ever in the market to the Germans, wiping out our entire gold reserves and costing the country, I mean, billions, hundreds of billions.
Yes.
And Rachel Reeves is a great fan of Gordon Brown, and that's perhaps why she gets everything so disastrously wrong. But for once, I think if they're sitting on this kind of money, yes, use it. And as you said, use it for something practical and sensible. The police are desperate for funds. You know, give them the money, let them actually get themselves properly equipped and properly manned.
Yeah.
Because, again, they keep talking about thousands of extra police and we never see them.
Well, we don't see them. And no disrespect to the rank and file, who I'm sure are beleaguered under hapless, overtly liberal bosses at the top of police forces, both in terms of police officers and, of course, the pointless notion of police crime commissioners. They don't seem to have worked out very well in terms of accountability at all, do they? So no, that money, absolutely, if you're going to do something with it, actually, if it's been seized as the proceeds of crime, put it towards fighting crime, put it towards police officers, investigations, and, you know, trying to actually solve crimes. And yes, build prisons. £5 billion would build a lot of prisons, I suspect. And finally, just before we go to the news, Piers, draining us dry. This is page 4 of The Sun. This is the Sun are calling them the greedy water regulator. This is Ofwat. Pay their management team more than £2 million. That's what they paid the team of execs that run the pointless, the idiotic water regulator that seem to do absolutely nothing. They're certainly not keeping our water bills down. And the chief executive, David Black of Ofwat, received himself a total remuneration package of £250,000 last year. I mean, for what? David Black.
It's called Ofwat.
Call in, David Black, and tell us, please, what it is that you do. Because, yes, you're supposed to be oversight. You're supposed to be protecting your customers. You're supposed to be protecting the public. But all we've seen is debacle after debacle with regard to the likes of Thames Water. And as we said earlier on, leaks and losses and so on. You don't seem to be acting in our best interest at all. Piers, quickly from you.
Yeah, well, you summed it up. It should be renamed For What instead of Ofwat.
Yes.
I mean, because it beggars belief, this. It's a total disaster.
Have you seen this? This will be right up your street just before we go to the news. A £15,000 deal has been done with Moxie Communications by Ofwat for advice including training for select committees. Well, I would suggest that the training you need for a select committee, guys, is just to tell the truth. Just do that. You don't need to be spun. It just needs to be the truth. OK, well, look, when we come back after the news, it's just coming up to 7 o'clock. Obviously, we'll have more of this. Do let us know if you want to get involved. 0344 499 1000, or indeed you can text your message to 87222 plus the word talk. I'm Russell Quirk. This is Talk Breakfast. Back after the news.
talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently are going to build it in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the Pip Parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going round that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth for this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a £5 in a pot and you can go and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed. Very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the Parks Hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. What about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner, says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed whack the rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it the channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine the Scouser say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour ghost train.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Good morning. Just gone 7 o'clock. I'm Russell Quirk in for Alex Phillips today until 10 o'clock. I'm still joined by Piers Pottinger for another half an hour or so. Then we have a packed show up till 10. We're talking about all things migrant hotels once again. Let me know what you think about what we have been talking about with regard to, first of all, the fact that it seems that not content with just jumping on a Deliveroo bike and working illegally, some migrants are making sex tapes for OnlyFans in hotels that are funded for asylum seekers by you. What do you think about that? We're also talking about migrant hotels in the context of those people within them that seem to be rather adept at committing crimes including rape, sexual assault, drug offences and assaults. There's an exclusive in the newspapers today recounting how there seems to be rather a propensity for shock horror asylum seekers, or rather economic migrants as most of them really are, to commit crime. Not very grateful, these people, are they? Coming over here, taking our 4-star hotels and our flat screen TVs and our pizzas and our phones and committing crime regardless. Even though, don't forget, asylum seekers, big inverted commas, receive about £46 a week in cash. They really are rinsing us, aren't they? And of course we do absolutely nothing about it. And of course the Epping The Bell Hotel issue, there will be further protests there apparently tonight. I will continue to urge that those protests, if you're listening to this and intending to go, good on you in terms of going along and protesting your concerns about the dynamic that is migration to this country and the link between migration and crime, it seems. But do go along peacefully. Do not be labelled. Do not put yourself in the position where you can be labelled by the media, particularly the left-leaning media, the Channel 4s, the Skies, the BBCs and the ITVs of this world, as far right. Do not fall into that trap. Go along with your placards, with your voices, and protest, but be peaceful. We're going to be talking a bit more about this later on, because it seems that there's some disquiet, some concern, some questions being asked of Essex police insofar as their involvement over the last 2 or 3 days with regard to left-wing protesters, seeming and so-called Antifa protesters, masked, by the way, with their refugees welcome, stop the far-right banners, actually being seen to have been corralled towards the protests, and then of course they start to agitate the parents, the protesters, the patriotic people there that are concerned about the state of Epping and indeed the wider Britain. So we will be talking about that later on in terms of hopefully some accounts from people like you that may have been there that can tell us exactly what has happened on the ground. So yes, all things of a migrant hotel nature, whether it be OnlyFans, whether it be Epping, or indeed crimes that are committed by people in them. So we're talking about that for the next 3 hours or so. 0344 499 1000. But also the BBC. Yes, they're in trouble again. Apparently they are yes, on their last legs, their last warning insofar as their conduct, because of course as the taxpayer, the licence payer that has to fund that outdated, backward and unaccountable organisation, yes, it's taken quite a lot so far, hasn't it, with the likes of Bob Villan at Glastonbury and the Gaza documentary and Jimmy Savile and Hugh Edwards and Gary Lineker and so on and so on, and Greg Wallace and so on and so on. But now it seems that we are all rather getting sick of the fact that the BBC takes our £170 a year, provides lousy output and is completely unaccountable. And as Piers here and I have just discussed, no one is ever fired. I can't get my head round how such a broken organisation with so many issues and so many failings doesn't fire someone, including Tim Davie, who is the head of that organisation. As I said earlier on, the fish rots from the head, and the head of that pointless, hapless, pathetic organisation, the BBC, is indeed Tim Davie. He should not resign, but be fired. Piers, just your comments on my little rant there, sir.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, no one's heads roll. I mean, there's a very good piece in the Sunday Times today by Rod Liddell, who used to be the editor of the Today programme in the days when it was a compelling radio programme on current affairs. And Rod Liddell makes the point himself, says no one ever gets fired. The organisation is absolutely now appalling. It's completely... so no one ever worries about getting fired because they know they won't. So they just continue doing very mediocre jobs very badly, and their output shows it. And also their reputation internationally has declined dramatically. The BBC has more foreign correspondents than any other news organisation in the world. And you wonder what some of them spend their time doing. For example, Jeremy Bowen, who is one of their most expensive foreign correspondents, was in Jerusalem for a year, or Tel Aviv, and during that time he failed to interview a single member of the Israeli cabinet.
Wow.
Now, if I was his news editor, I would actually wonder how that man justifies his existence.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? No one there seems to be able to or needs to justify
Well,
their
Sarah
existence.
Smith, the Washington editor, she's called editor, don't quite know what she edits, but she is their senior correspondent in Washington, daughter of John Smith, the former Labour leader, of course, so we know what her politics are, and she... of course, doesn't admit that she's not actually allowed into the White House press conferences, and she has failed to interview a single member of the Trump administration since she's been there. I mean, if I was the news editor, I'd say, what are we paying these people for?
Well, and just to add to that, of course, we've just had Glastonbury, at which a further scandal erupted for the BBC.
Yeah,
Tim Davies sitting there sipping Prosecco or whatever he was doing, watching rants by the likes of Bob Villan in a very anti-Semitic and hate-filled way, and allowed that to go out, and indeed allowed that output to stay on iPlayer for 5 hours. No accountability at all. Yeah, and look, talking about accountability, I do want to talk also about this this little exclusive that we were going to reveal, which is this C2C rail story, which is something that we have uncovered. So this is C2C rail. This is the rail service that takes people from Southend through Essex to Fenchurch Street. A previously privatised business, but now a business that has been nationalised. This is all part of the government's plan, of course, to nationalise everything, because they think that civil servants can run things like rail companies better than private companies. They might be right. I suspect they're not. Let's wait and see. However, now that it's nationalised, of course, it's funded by public money. However, C2C have decided that now that they are using public money, they have decided that they will still invest, inverted commas, in promoting themselves via sponsorship of Southend United. So in other words, Southend United Football Club are going to have C2C on their shirts and C2C rail around the ground, one would imagine. I ask you this, what is it that justifies public money being spent on sponsoring a football club? I mean, first of all, it's public money. Secondly, this is just something I would venture that is the vanity project of the executives of C2C Rail, whereby maybe they are big Southend United fans and quite fancy having a box at Southend and being able to go and watch various games with their mates on a Saturday afternoon. What business, Piers, does a publicly funded organisation have spending money by giving it to a football club for sponsorship purposes?
None at all. It's absolutely
This is
crazy.
disgusting, isn't it?
Of course it's crazy. Of course, I mean, remember the railways were privatised because they were such a disaster when they were nationalised before. So we're just going back to square one. And I mean, and I think the very first nationalised train, if I'm right, was cancelled, and there was, of course, a replacement bus service. I mean, it's farcical and it's very sad. Our rail network should again be a source of pride and joy, and taking a lot of freight off the road on our overstretched motorways. But because it's so badly run, that doesn't happen. On top of that, we've spent billions on this HS2 speed link high-speed trains. Now, it appears all those high-speed trains are obsolete already because the maglev in China, which is now being launched, is far superior, far cheaper and far faster. So the ones that they're looking at, this line they're putting in, is already out of date. I mean, we seem to have no decent long-term planning in our infrastructure, anything to do with thinking beyond the next year. I mean, all Starmer is trying to do at the moment is make sure he gets re-elected, and he'll do anything to do that.
Let's go back to skewer C2C, can we? Because I'm genuinely outraged by this. I mean, if it's one thing, the rail companies being nationalised on the false premise, in my opinion, that they will now run more efficiently. I mean, let's roll forward a year or two, everybody, and let's see if C2C is not only more efficient but also save money. Because don't forget, the whole premise of nationalising, in particular the rail companies, was to bring fares down. Now, spending goodness knows how many thousands of pounds on sponsoring Southend United, I don't think is particularly conducive with reducing costs and therefore reducing rail fare passengers. But let me read you this just to give the other side of this from C2C. The C2C Managing Director, Rob Mullen, this is on their website, by the way, so this is not speculative. This is something that C2C are very proud of. C2C is delighted to be continuing its what they call platinum partnership with Southend United this forthcoming season, and we can't wait to see our logo again at the front and centre of the new home, away and third shirts. Although last season didn't quite have the fairy tale ending that we were hoping for, we are immensely proud to have partnered with the club during a year in which so much was achieved on and off the pitch and in the communities that we both serve. The commercial and interim customer director Eleni Jordan says, through our partnership we have worked closely with the club and local groups, blah blah blah. They say that the partnership is aligned with social value goals. I don't quite know what that is, and we are committed to this through the purpose, coalition. A load of management mumbo jumbo.
You're running a train service, love.
Coalition, honestly.
God.
Management speak nonsense. So, in other words, the directors, the bosses at C2C have decided to spend money sponsoring Southend United, I suspect, so that they can go and watch a few games with their mates. This is absolutely disgusting and outrageous. This is public money. This is not how a public organisation should be run, by way of throwing money at your favourite football club. What you should be doing is running a more efficient service, reducing costs and passing those costs on to beleaguered rail travellers. 0344 499 1000. Do you agree with me, or do you think this is okay? Or maybe we should, I don't know, sponsor Formula One. Maybe, you know, Ipswich Council can sponsor Red Bull. I mean, would that be okay? Would it?
It's nonsense.
I don't think so.
No, it's absolute nonsense. You're so right. And I mean, they're running a train service. That's what they should be focusing on.
Yeah. And
forget all this social value nonsense. People are not travelling on their train service for any other reason than to get from A to B efficiently and cheaply as possible.
Yeah.
And that's what they should be focusing on, nothing else.
Piers, I'm sad to say I have to say goodbye to you. Thank you very, very much indeed for the last hour and 15 minutes. Hopefully we've somewhat put the world to rights. Let me know what you think about my conversation with Piers Pottinger, 0344 499 1000. Piers, thank you very much indeed. You can go off and enjoy the rest of your Sunday, now that the sun is kind of almost out as I look out the window here from Talk Towers. We will be back after this break. I'm Russell Quirk. This is Talk Breakfast.
Slowly there was going to be greater alignment on certain things, not necessarily to our significant benefit, purely because of the financial cost. I mean, any amount of money that we're spending in order for British citizens to be able to use e-gates is not an amount of money worth spending. It is this strange Remainer middle class fantasy where they go, oh, I have to add 20 minutes onto my entire trip because I have to queue at the at passport control, whereas everybody else gets to use the electronic gates. And for that, we're supposed to give them how much money?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's talk some more BBC, shall we, with our favourite former BBC guest, John Mayer, former BBC producer. John, welcome to Talk Breakfast. How are you?
I'm doing all right, thank you very much, Russell. I'm not sure the BBC is doing all right, but I'm all right.
Well, it's not really, is it? I mean, is it time that we either shut it down or made it sing for its own supper financially by way of it becoming a subscription service? Come on, let's be honest.
No, but it is time for Tim Davie to get a grip, really.
Or to be fired.
Well, I don't make those sort of decisions.
No, but do you think he should be fired? If you did make those decisions, would you be one of the people on the executive saying he should be fired?
Not yet. I mean,
no. How can he not be fired?
Well, he can't be fired because he's Director General, and they're going into a very delicate period.
Are you saying he's unfireable, John? Is he unfireable?
No, I'm not saying he's unfireable. He's probably on a yearly contract, so he's probably got another 6 months left of that. No, he's not unfireable, but he does need to get a willy. Now, don't get too excited about that. Margaret Thatcher had Willie Whitelaw to take the flak for her.
Sorry, did you just say that Tim Davie needs to be willied?
No, he needs to get somebody who takes the flak. All the flak comes to him.
So he needs some protection, but he's hapless. Surely he's the problem, isn't he?
No, this has been horrible this week for the BBC. I mean,
again,
Monday to have two reports, which they could control both reports to come out about it. To have them both come out on the same day and then the annual report the next day. You couldn't make it up. I mean, do they have a PR department, or is the PR department hiding?
No, but John, hang on. It's not about polishing a something beginning with T and well, yeah, you said it. I don't think I'm allowed to say it, but anyway, it's not about that, is it? It's not about putting glitter on something less desirable. It's surely about behaving in a proper and scrutinous and professional way in the first place. This isn't about PR, and it's not about protecting Tim Davie. This is about having a professionally run organisation that doesn't end up in a scandal every week, isn't it?
Well, it's about avoiding crises, and you avoid crises down the line. You don't let them come and hit you and then think, oh dear, what am I going to do now? You know, it is about avoiding those crises. I mean, Greg Wallace was just waiting to happen, wasn't it? You know, you could tell it.
Well, for 20 years it was waiting to happen, John. Because the complaint started 20 years ago. There were 83 of them, half of them upheld.
And apparently John Turode has had a few complaints, only one properly upheld.
But hang on. Now you've mentioned John Turode, I was going to mention him. He's been fired for something that he doesn't remember saying that was something to do with something inappropriate, allegedly, that he repeated as part of some kind of song or rap. So one thing from a number of years ago that he can't remember, he got fired. Tim Davie has overseen Lineker, Gaza, Bob Villan, Kneecap, Hugh Edwards. I mean, you know, we can go on and on and on and on and on, and yet somehow survives. In any private sector organisation, John, Tim Davie would have been fired probably a year ago.
The trouble is, if you're in a weak position, you hit out. And John Turode is probably collateral damage in this. In the Tim probably saw him and the BBC in a weak position.
Well,
so
it seems somewhat two-tier, is what I'm saying.
Well, there's two presenters, two tiers, but yes, I mean...
No, two-tier in terms of... There's a rule for John Turode, which is that he does something relatively minor that he then apologises for, but gets fired anyway. Tim Davie is the head of the organisation, the man that has the influence, the man that people effectively look to run that organisation, the man that... has operational control over policy and vision. Basically, the buck stops with Tim Davie. No matter what happens in terms of scandal and debacle and, you know, one failure to the next, he survives. He doesn't get fired or resign. I don't think people listening to this or watching this are going to be very happy with the fact that he seems to be untouchable. And then guess what happens, John? We will end up with another scandal in a couple of weeks, and then another one in September, and then another one towards the end of the year, because Tim Davie is untouchable and will probably act, and is acting, in my opinion, accordingly. He's the problem. He's got to be fired.
No, there was a question in there somewhere, wasn't there? I mean, there's
a statement, a question, whatever. But why are you defending Tim Davie, John?
Well, A, because he's a friend, and B, he's a moderately competent job. Now, just wait a minute. There's a structural problem here. Tim's background is in marketing. You know, he comes from Pepsi Cola and from Procter & Gamble.
What's that got to do with that?
And he's a recovering Tory. He's not a journalist. He's not a journalist, nor is the man.
But he's responsible. How much money does he earn, John?
500 something thousand.
He earns 10 grand a week.
Yeah, it's just been increased. You'll be pleased to hear, Russell.
For what? And back to the friend thing. If Hugh Edwards was your friend, would you be defending him?
No.
Why are you defending Tim Davie?
I don't think Tim Davie has done anything that's that bad. He's badly managed a few crises, but that's something different. He needs to get a grip.
He's mismanaging one of the largest organisations in Britain that's paid for by tax,
which he should manage better than he has done. And you know, they do need to think, how are we going to stop it week after week after week, one crisis after yet another. But he's got you lot after him. He's got the hyenas. You know.
No, he's got us after him because it's not like if it was ITV or Channel 4 or Sky, we'd be leaving him alone because they're commercial organisations that are funded by shareholders. Tim Davie's salary and the organisation are funded by forced contributions. Forced contributions.
Let's talk about Gaza for a minute, Russell. Why isn't
Gaza? What was Gaza got to do? Do you mean the Gaza documentary that you oversaw?
You mentioned it. Why isn't the BBC allowed to report in Gaza? You know, how can you have decent journalists?
No one's saying that they can't report. What we are saying is they can't put together a documentary that turns out to be stilted on the basis of the people that they use in that documentary have families that are members of Hamas. I mean,
but hang on, but real journalists, real international journalists are not allowed into Gaza to report. So how can anybody hope to report anything objectively when you're not allowed to be there?
Well, maybe because it's not safe. But maybe if you want to talk about Gaza, John, maybe what we should start with is the fact that the BBC still don't want to call Hamas terrorists.
Well, no. I mean, look. I mean,
this
You're
is
quite the apologist, John, aren't you? What should Tim Davey? What should Tim Davey do better, sir? What should Tim Davey do better?
I'm a critical. Tim Davey? I say it again. Needs a flat catcher. He needs a willy. He needs somebody to stop him getting into trouble. And he also needs to appear in public more often.
No, I'd suggest that what he needs is competence, and he doesn't have it.
Well, that's your view. I mean,
it's obvious, isn't it? How many more scandals do I need to read off under his tenure?
Well, you read off 4, and you don't want to talk. Gaza is a sore on the British media, and people like you should be jumping up and down and saying we will not tolerate not being allowed into Gaza. Even if the BBC, if we're whoever, the BBC is a wonderful organisation in terms of what it produces.
What happens there in terms of who's permitted? It's got nothing to do with what we're talking about, which is the failure that is the BBC and the fact that we are forced to pay for it and that there's no accountability. Let's get back to the point. And Tim Davey is the head of it.
Licence fees coming up for renewal, as you know, and I'm just editing a book on that, and there will be 1 or 2 problems. I've never known it under more attack than it is now.
But John, it's under attack for good reason. I mean, I'm not just criticising the fact that they continue to produce a show like Mrs. Brown's Boys. I mean, that would be bad enough. But I'm not criticising them just for their output and the fact that at Christmas no one watches the BBC anymore because there's nothing on. I mean, the occasional Gavin and Stacey notwithstanding. But it's certainly not the output of 10 or 15 or 20 years ago in terms of quality. We're not talking about output. We're talking about scandals, mainly sex scandals. Presenters that fall out of line and whereby it is covered up for them because otherwise it's embarrassing for the BBC. And again, I'll keep saying Tim Davey fails to take accountability for his lack of oversight and his lack of competence, and you're defending him. I would suggest
what's the BBC for if it's not to make programmes, if it's not about output, if it's not about making great programmes?
Well, should we go back to what it... We can go back to what it was... John, let's go back to what it was designed to be in the 1950s, and that is to be a trusted source of information. Do you really think it... Oh, come on. Do you really think it's a trust? Hang on. You think an organisation that won't call Hamas terrorists, which they are legally as a prescribed organisation, you think that we should trust that source when they won't even label a terrorist organisation as terrorists?
Recent survey research shows that 86% of people trust BBC News.
Well, 86% of people at the BBC think that we should trust the BBC?
No, this is not...
Where's that survey from, John? Can you just make it up?
I think you'll find that's from the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism. 86% of people...
Wow, so 86% of journalists were asked about the BBC and they defended it. Surprise.
Listen. 86% of real people were asked what the most trusted news source was.
I don't believe that stat for a second.
Well, all right.
Send me the link. Send me the link. I can't wait to see it. But let's go back to the point, which is we see scandal after scandal, debacle after debacle. How do you think, apart from protecting Tim Davey from himself, it seems, is what you're saying, and apart from somehow engaging a better PR agency, which again I don't subscribe to those two things being the solution at all. Rather, the solution being one of competence. How else can the BBC restore its faith and confidence in the public?
Make good programmes. Make good programmes that people watch, that people want to watch.
Fine. Okay, I agree. So how do they do that? Because they're not doing that. How do they do that, John?
Well, they do that by getting a decent licence fee settlement. They've lost 30% in real terms of their budget in the last 10 years.
So you think they should have more money?
No, well, licence fee should... I actually think there should be a hybrid licence fee. I think there should be a public service licence fee of, say, £100, where you get everything once. And then beyond the iPlayer paywall, you have to pay for it. The BBC has a very valuable product, and it should be selling that. It's not doing that very well at the moment.
But John, don't you think seriously that if the BBC's output and quality and its kind of faith, if you like, in the public place in it, its credibility, don't you think if all of those boxes were ticked that it could charge a subscription and people will be happy to pay it?
I think it does, and it will, and it will probably have to go to some form of subscription, but not full on. The other side, that's what you use the iPlayer for, and it will also have to think, by the way, of dropping some things. Maybe the BBC does too much.
Tim Davie has to address that.
I agree.
Should we pay for the World Service? What do we get from the World Service?
The World Service, I think, is an institution. I think that's one of the only bits that isn't broken, frankly. But BBC Three TV, BBC Four, BBC Radio 6 and 6 Plus and whatever else, I'm not sure they're necessary. I also don't think it's necessary to send 400 people to Glastonbury at their public expense, do you?
Well, for 3 days of broadcasting. Well,
400 people. 400 people to watch anti-Semitism and then broadcast it on stage. That seems quite a lot of people.
One piece of anti-Semitism. Look,
only one piece.
3 days of solid broadcasting on TV, on radio, online. I think that's pretty good value. But possibly too many people. No, I mean, what the BBC needs to do now is make good programmes, explain itself better to people. I mean, Tim and others need to be out there in the open much more, rather than hiding and saying, look, we did this, we did that, and we did this because of the following.
Well, John, it's ironic. It's ironic that it's one of the biggest broadcasting organisations in the world, and you're saying that it's not vocal enough. Wow.
I agree. Totally.
I mean, that's not just ironic. That's just stupid of them if they can't even get their own output about themselves right. Look, John, we've got to move on. Thank you very much indeed.
All right. Well, good to talk to you. But let's do it again.
Well, I'd love to. Maybe we should do this over a beer and put the BBC to rights. Because actually, I think you're coming round to my way of thinking. Because you're kind of agreeing that it should be at least part subscription. So we're chipping away at you, John Mayer. We're chipping away at you. John, thank you. Right, we better take a break. I need to take a breather. Let me know what you think about that. 0344 499 1000. Are you happy just to pay through the nose for pathetic and worthless content and scandal after scandal at the BBC? Let me know. 0344 499 1000. I'm Russell Quirk. This is Talk Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Russell Quirk. I'm in for Alex Phillips until 10 o'clock. I want to talk more about migrant hotels. Let me know what you think about these stories that we are covering here on Talk this morning. 0344 499 1000. Now you're up and about and you've had your first tea or coffee. Get involved, or indeed you can text 87222 plus the word Talk. Yes, migrant hotels, as we've been rehearsing over the last hour and a half, there's all sorts of news about migrant hotels this morning. I mean, first of all, there's this migrant hotel sex tape scandal. This is, according to the Daily Mail, fury as 2 asylum seekers are found filming an OnlyFans porn video in their taxpayer-funded room in Blackpool. Wow, I know we are the land of opportunity. I'm all for entrepreneurialism, but that seems to be a bit beyond the pale. And also, they're not supposed to be working and earning money. But maybe they were going to, I don't know, donate the money to Care for Calais or something. 0344 499 1000. Let me know what you think about that. Are you as outraged as I am? You should be. And also, hundreds of migrants living in taxpayer-funded hotels are accused of offences including rape, sex attacks, robbery, theft, and violence. 312 asylum seekers have been charged with an astonishing 708 alleged criminal offences in just 3 years, including rape, sexual assault and attacking emergency workers. Well, I'd like to talk to someone that knows about this kind of thing, and I'm sure we'll have an opinion, which is Mike Neville, who's a retired Scotland Yard detective chief inspector. Mike, this is yet another appalling account of the state of behaviour for this particular demographic, which is migrants, or let's call them economic migrants. Some people call them asylum seekers, but they are economic migrants. This is getting out of control now, isn't it?
It's out of control, and what rather sums it up to me, Russell, is that hotel you mentioned, the Metropole. My grandmother used to go there in her Sunday best. That was their holiday for a week, and it just sums up how the country has fallen apart. And what people see every day, they see these undocumented young men come in here who come from countries where attacks on women are perfectly acceptable. And what's really good, though, is about Talk is that we're able to discuss this on here. Too often, for decades, this sort of criminality has been covered up. and the fact that immigrants commit a large amount of crime, it has been concealed by government after government after government. And now the country is finding out. I think what you see in Epping is a microcosm of what people feel throughout the country. People are concerned about their mothers, their daughters, their sisters, their wives, and it's just getting beyond control. That having these young men in this country who we know nothing about is absolute madness, and the government is facilitating this madness.
And of course it took a lot of people and a lot of pressure from people like Rupert Lowe, for instance, to have the government actually publish figures like they have in places like Denmark. Of course, Scandinavia has been overrun by migration, illegal migration, and certainly countries like Sweden have seen the consequences of that in terms of gangs of migrants running around setting fire to things, explosions, sexual offences through the roof and so on. Of course, we've also seen what's happening in Greece recently, another part of the world that's been completely overrun by the migrant crisis, if you want to call it that, and have now closed their doors to all asylum seekers. They've literally pulled the drawbridge up in Greece and said no one can now come here and claim asylum. And it's funny, isn't it, Mike, that they're part of the EU, and you would think that they'd be beholden to the EU in terms of those regulations and indeed the United Nations. But where we say that we can't do things because of certain rules and regulations, seems incredible to me that actually places like Greece can do exactly what they like when it comes to migrants, as indeed can Poland. You know, it was a little while ago that I think it was Channel 4 interviewed a Polish politician who just said, look, we're just not going to let, he actually said, we're not going to let Muslims in. He said, we're just not going to let migrants in because we just don't want the problems that he sees come with such an influx. It's incredible that we can't stand up for ourselves and that we allow this open door policy. And then some of us are surprised, well, you and I are not, but those on the left are surprised that then we call this out and say, hey, look, after all, there is a link between people that come here from other countries and their propensity to commit crime. Angela Rayner actually this week tried to deny that, even though the facts, the data is very, very clear that there are some countries in terms of people migrating from those countries that have a much higher propensity to commit things like violent crime and sexual offences. So you're right, we are now seeing it. And I guess if you continue to cover it up, or the government continues to cover it up, then we shouldn't be that surprised when we see what happens in Epping, should we?
Shouldn't at all. I mean, 10 years ago, I was sent to Cologne to help the German police as a sort of advisor after a load of sex attacks there on New Year's Eve. And once again, the government there tried to conceal it until it burst out. They couldn't conceal it because everybody had it recorded on mobile phones and CCTV. And what we see is across the West, a sort of liberal left governments trying to live the multicultural dream. They don't realise it's come to an end. They can't stand it. So when Starmer stands up and says, oh, we'll smash the gangs, why he says that is because he sees the actual people in the boats as some kind of victims who need to be helped, who are fleeing war. And there's so little will to do anything. So the first thing you need is a desire to do something. So you'll get Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, saying, oh, Reformer talked about simple solutions. Well, I'll tell you some simple solutions. Employ me tomorrow. I'd ask for 3 battalions of infantry to be put on the beaches. I'd try and negotiate with the French who will put some of their soldiers on the beaches to slash the boats. I'd have other soldiers helping build camps on some remote Scottish island. And as soon as these people were coming in, they'd be interviewed, find out who they'd paid, find out any mobile numbers, find out who the people in charge of this is so we could arrest them. And the people on that boat, once they've been processed and interviewed, would be shipped off to a camp where they'd be given some warm food and a blanket. And they would be held there until we can see. These people are an enormous threat.
The solutions are simple, whether it's that deterrent, as you just laid out, in terms of it being kind of, physical, I suppose, or indeed just removing the incentive, which is free stuff, whether it's dentistry, NHS, accommodation, pizzas, mobile phones. It was seen that removing the incentive, as I've said many, many times on this channel, would be the most obvious thing to do. And Australia did it, of course. Tony Abbott did it. But I just want to talk, before we, I want to talk about this OnlyFans thing, which I'm laughing, but it's not funny really, is it? But before I do that, let's just quickly turn back to the Epping question. There was a lot of speculation on social media yesterday, on Twitter in particular, with regard to the police handling of the Epping protests over the last 48 hours. Lots of people saying that the police, and I'll say this with inverted commas because I've not been able to stand this up, but allegations that the police bussed left-wing Antifa-type protesters, masked protesters, many of them, from Epping Station to the centre of the protests by the Bell Hotel in Epping yesterday. Now, lots of people kind of understanding, I think, that if the police were to bus protesters away, counter-protesters, that, I guess you could say, is a logical thing for the police to do operationally, so as to try and prevent trouble between the left and those protesters. But busing protesters or walking protesters towards the protests, counter-protesters, walking them towards the protests so that there would be an inevitable clash, doesn't seem to me to be something that is particularly wise operationally, or indeed in the police handbook, does it?
It's absolutely incredible to me. The footage I've seen is seemingly they're being shipped away, which even so, I've never known that. Can you imagine the police pulling up at a Millwall match, say, get in the van, lads, we'll give you a lift to the station so you can get away from here. I've never seen anything like it. But just to give you an idea, Russell, one of the superintendents who's quoted on a lot of the Essex stuff is a man called Tim Tubbs. And he is the staff officer to the national lead on diversity and inclusion. So it almost tells you where their political allegiance lies when you see this sort of thing. And the other hypocrisy of the left, if you remember Starmer and Rayner, they made a big deal in Southport that all these thugs, they've been shipped in by the far right from other places, which ultimately was found to be untrue. All those who were convicted of offences came from a few miles away from where they were. But it's seemingly not all right for right-wing people to go and protest at some other town, but it's wonderful if left-wing protesters go to do that, and then they're facilitated by the authorities.
But you see how people
absolutely crazy.
But Mike, you see how people start to speculate. And again, I'm not saying that this is correct. I'm just rehearsing what was speculated by right-meaning people. When I say right, I mean correct-meaning people on social media yesterday. That is this. The protests were peaceful. There's lots of people standing around the Bell Hotel, concerned local residents, they were local, and parents, concerned about the criminality that it seems, that it is alleged, may have been at the behest of some of the occupants of the Bell Hotel, right? That's their concern. It was peaceful. There were people standing around, they were filming, they were chatting amongst themselves. Surely then, if you get 30, 40 to 50 so-called Antifa counter-protesters in masks with banners that say all refugees welcome, stop the far right and so on, and you bring them towards those protesters, you are lighting the touch paper. So the speculation, the conspiracy starts, Mike, that actually this was engineered, and some might argue, and again I'm being conspiratorial here on behalf of those people on social media yesterday, perhaps the authorities wanted trouble to erupt so that the media then the next day can say, look, the far right again, the far right are causing trouble in Epping, the far right were jumping all over police vans and kicking windows in. Whereas actually it seems that some might say this was engineered for trouble.
Actually, it's really tragic that I have to sort of agree with you. The police in this country were seen as utterly impartial in the past. They were seen as the best police force in the world. Sir Robert Mark once said the police should win by appearing to lose. And what we have here as well is, if you remember the Palestine protesters, all the protests in London, a guy was told, you look too Jewish, clear off, you're going to cause trouble. So this is the trouble all the time, that the police are not seen as impartial. And trust and confidence in policing in this country is at rock bottom. So by doing what they're doing here and almost seemingly stirring up trouble, why do that? I mean, I saw a lady on a megaphone at Epping saying that we don't want any violence, no trouble.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what should, that's what they're saying.
Again, Mike,
right,
as we've been saying all morning, that if you're going to go along and protest, exercise your right to protest, but do it peacefully. Mike Neville, look, thank you very much as ever. Wise words. Let's just go to a quick call before we go to a break. Michael in Norfolk wants to talk about the BBC, I think. Michael, big supporter of the BBC and how things are going for it at the moment?
I think the BBC is a terrible organisation. We don't have a television, we don't buy a licence, and we would never support it.
Wow. And how do you know what's going on if you don't watch it? Are you just looking at the news and seeing scandal after scandal after scandal and getting rather irritated, are you?
It is beyond a joke. I mean, Hugh Edwards, Jimmy Savile, I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, Greg Wallace, Gaza documentaries, Glastonbury, and so on and so on. I wonder what there'll be next week. I mean, you can almost set your calendar by it, can't you? Oh, it's Tuesday. There must be a BBC scandal brewing.
Well, you're dead right. I wonder what the next one will be. And the other thing that really annoys us, right, we haven't got a television licence. Every 12 months we get notification, would you fill it, we're going to fill in a form to say that we haven't got one and we might be inspected for not having a television.
Well, do you think they can just... But they... Hang on a second, Mike. They can't just knock on your door and then force their way in to check your house for TV sets, surely?
Wow. I wouldn't let them in.
That would be pretty dystopian, but look, I wouldn't put it past them. Look, Michael, I've got to move on. Thank you very much indeed for your call. If you want to be like Michael and call in, please do. 0344 499 1000, whether it's around Epping, perhaps you were there, you can give us an account as to what's happened there over the last 2 or 3 days, or let us know what you think about migrants making OnlyFans sex films in taxpayer-funded hotels, or indeed talk to us about the BBC and what you think about the value for money that you're getting from Tim Davie and his hapless organisation that is the BBC. It's 7:45. I'm Russell Quirk. I'm in for Alex Phillips. I'm here till 10 o'clock. This is Talk Breakfast.
They are just so ideologically driven now that they cannot face reality because I think their brains would melt.
Yeah, and next time I hear some two-bit little Westminster idiot going, diversity is our strength. The King keeps saying diversity is our strength. Tell that to the poor little 15-year-old girl who got raped down the back of a pub in Falkirk by a guy who just arrived in a small boat. Tell that to her parents. Come on, let's get real about this, shall we?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm Russell Quirk. This is Talk Breakfast. It's just coming up to 10 to 8. Let me just read you some texts that we've had in this morning. We've had lots and lots and lots. Thank you. You can also text, by the way, 87222 in the word talk, or you can call in, as many people have. We'll get to your calls later. 0344 499 1000. Sharon from Staffordshire says this: the reason for the Epping protest is because the British people are sick and tired of what is happening in this country. These people coming into our country, committing crimes and getting away with it, and getting everything for free at taxpayers' expense and contributing nothing when British people need it more. This is a joke There was a word in there that I can't repeat. And the British people are fed up of it. Can this government not, another swear word, see that? So Sharon seems rather animated. Yes, many of you, I'm sure, will agree very, very much indeed with Sharon. She has texted a number of times, actually, but that's fine, Sharon. There's no limit. She also has a view on TV licensing. The TV licence fee needs to be scrapped completely, and Tim Davie needs to go. It's a catalogue of incompetence and being paid so much money for doing so. Yes, let's just reiterate, Tim Davie is on £500,000 of your pounds. They are your pounds because you pay for them. Tony Gannon says Nigel Farage and Reform UK wouldn't be allowed to succeed even if they win the next general election. Our deep state will mobilise against him. Liz Truss was absolutely right. We are in a managed decline. Nobody is allowed to change anything. OK, Nigel Farage fan there. And Sam says, totally agree with everything that you've been saying on the BBC, and that's why I won't be renewing my licence tax. Well, OK, steady. We don't want to encourage you to break the law. We're not suggesting that you don't renew your licence fee. What we're challenging is the output and the oversight of Tim Davie and his, in my view, lack of competence when it comes to running that organisation. Right, let's talk about something else that's certainly made the headlines this week and has been very, very polarising indeed, and that's the question of votes for 16-year-olds. This is something that the government are going to push through. I think it's just about the only thing that they said that they were going to do in their manifesto that they are now actually going to do. So congratulations, Labour front bench, on actually doing one of the things that you said you were going to do a year ago. Let's talk to Reem Ibrahim, Communications Manager at the IEA. Reem, it's been a while. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm not so good with children voting, though.
Neither am I, and I think this is the point, right? We're starting to see the government infantilise adults, doing things like, taking away all of our rights when it comes to banning tobacco with the generational tobacco ban, telling adults what they can and cannot do with their own lives. The government continuously nanny us with so many aspects, and yet they seem to think that whilst adults aren't capable of making their own decisions about their own lifestyle choices, the 16 and 17-year-olds of this country are perfectly capable of making a decision about who should run this country. Now, I think there are various different aspects to this. The fundamental point is that over 18-year-olds of younger generation tend to not show up to vote anyway. So 16 and 17-year-olds, I don't think there's any reason to really think that they're going to vote in their swathes in the way that 18 to 34-year-olds, for example, don't. There is also the question about whether or not this is just plain old gerrymandering, right? I mean, 16, 17-year-olds tend to be on the left. I was certainly on the left.
Do they, Reem? Do they? I mean, there is a school of thought that actually the government, political as this is in terms of its intentions, really, actually underestimate the fact that a lot of 15 and 16-year-olds are quite politically motivated now towards the right. So do you think that they've got this wrong in terms of assuming that, A, 16-year-olds will actually go out and vote, and secondly, that if they do, they will vote of a left-wing persuasion? I think they might be wrong.
Yes, we don't really know exactly what that looks like. I mean, some polling does suggest that there is a surge amongst 16, 17-year-olds of their support for reform. I'm a little bit more sceptical about what that looks like more widespread. I think that younger people, generally speaking, tend to veer to the left, and that hasn't really changed. I mean, that hasn't changed in the last 100 years, really. Younger people have always tended to be a little bit more left-wing. I mean, I was a massive Corbyn supporter when I was 16. I was definitely a dying of the left.
Hang on, sorry, Reem, you were a massive Corbyn supporter?
Yes, I was.
But you're a right-wing libertarian.
I am.
What happened?
When I started studying economics, I changed my views.
Did you realise that socialism is all a fantasy?
I did. I think what it was is I didn't really fully understand what it was. I think some people like Corbyn. The thing is, when you're 16, what you want is easy answers. If I asked my 11-year-old sister, would you rather live in a world where everybody has to work hard and take responsibility for their actions? Or would you rather live in a world where everybody has the same happy, fun, lovely life and everybody earns the same and everybody's equal? She'd probably choose the latter.
Well, I guess if I'm asking the question, would you just like some free money, which is basically socialism, most people are going to say yes. But when faced with the consequences of that in terms of, public debt, GDP shrinkage, unemployment and so on, and the wealthy leaving this country at the greatest rate of knots ever, 16,000 millionaires this year, by the way, when you realise the unintended consequences of such ideology, maybe not quite so good. Let me ask you this, Reem. The Angela Rayner edict this week, in terms of justifying this proposal, this Votes for 16-year-olds, which, as I've just said in my intro, is very much something that they did say they were going to do before being elected. So a little tiny round of applause for Labour that they've actually going to, or they haven't quite yet, but they will enact one part of their manifesto at least a year on, albeit. But the words that Angela Rayner used were that those that contribute and therefore work at 16 and contribute by way of taxation should be allowed to vote. I have, I guess, two extensions of logic in that regard. One is that should my 14-year-old paper boy that earns 30 quid a week also therefore be able to vote? What about the 10-year-old that buys sweets and pays VAT on those sweets? Should they be allowed to vote? But if it's a question of contribution, here's a question for you. What about therefore taking the vote away from those people that don't contribute? So I'm not seriously suggesting this, but I'm just extending the fuzzy logic of Angela Rayner and the Labour front bench. Should we be saying that actually if you don't contribute and therefore because you're on benefits, you shouldn't vote, shouldn't be able to vote?
Well, that is the logic, and that would actually take away a lot of the vote from young people. I mean, we saw from the unemployment statistics on Thursday, the labour market statistics, that about 21% of 16 to 64-year-olds are economically inactive. That is absolutely vast. Economic inactivity has really increased over the last few years, especially post-pandemic. I mean, I think that economic inactivity is one of the most important issues facing this country. There are literally millions of people, many of them young, people my age, that are being consigned to a lifetime of worklessness because if you are on universal credit and you receive personal dependence payments and you get child benefits, you could be earning about £27,000 a year.
When you say earning?
By the state. You could be
receiving. Being given.
You could be given about £27,000 a year. If you're on universal credit and PIP, you're already above the minimum wage. So it is really, really difficult.
And sorry, Reem, to that point, I mean, it's hideously fascinating, isn't it, that is the case, that you could be given £27,000 for basically doing nothing. But of course, that's net. If you were to go and earn £27,000 as a take-home amount of money, you would have to earn about £40,000. You'd have to be earning about £3,500 a month in a job to end up with the same amount that some people can get on benefits.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's why I think the incentives are totally skewed. I mean, this is the problem, where there are millions of people that are basically being told, you don't worry, you don't need to work, you can stay at home. The rest of the fools in this country will pay their extortionately high taxes and foot the bill for you. Now, there obviously are some people in this country that are unable to work. I don't buy the argument that a quarter of the population are disabled. I don't believe it. I don't think anybody can believe that a quarter of the population are disabled. They're just not, right? Because the way we've made personal dependence payments so easy to receive, it does mean that it's so much easier for so many people to game the system. And it isn't just gaming the system, right? This is the system's fault. You can't blame somebody who's 24, has a child, and says, you know what, if I say I've got anxiety or depression, I could be earning about £40,000 a year, pre-tax salary, being given by the state. If you've got a young child and you're thinking, you know what, I would be earning less if I went to the private sector, I'm going to stay on benefits. I don't blame those people, I blame the system.
You blame the system, yeah. But let's get back to the vote issue. I mean, am I onto something in terms of the contribution element being the qualification for voting? Or maybe an IQ test, Reem. I'm saying that with a big tongue-in-cheek. But seriously, you can skew the voting system all you like. I noticed the other day, actually, with the forthcoming mayoral elections, there's certainly about to be one potentially in Essex in May, to stop the rise of Reform, who, of course, are doing very, very well in the polls and doing very, very well in by-elections recently. The government are going to apparently see fit to change the whole voting system. So it's going to become one of preference voting rather than first past the post. Is that just simply to stop Reform winning mayoral seats? I mean, is it blatant politicking?
Well, I would expect that this kind of system would probably benefit smaller parties like Reform.
But I'm not sure they're the smaller party now in terms of their polling support.
What it is it's actually about vote distribution, so where those votes are distributed. The problem is, whilst Reform are polling very, very well, a lot of their votes tend to be distributed, and obviously those kind of votes aren't particularly useful for a first past the post system, because you're competing with basically a very, very thin majority. The Labour Party have a very thin majority. We forget, even though they have way more seats than Jeremy Corbyn won in 2019, Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party won more votes than Sir Keir Starmer's Labour Party.
Horrifying to think, but true, yes.
Because of the electoral system, though, where those votes are distributed, that's what matters. So I would actually suspect a system like this would probably actually benefit a party like Reform. I think the problem is, whilst we're having conversation, and I'm actually quite supportive of electoral reform, because in the current system totally skews us towards the establishment parties.
Well, and proportional representation, so we end up with loads of coalitions in the future?
Yeah, I'm fine with coalitions. I want the government to do less, so I'd rather them not do more.
Maybe we could be more like Belgium, Reem. Do you remember Belgium didn't have a government for about 380 days and no one noticed?
For 18 months. No, but the thing is, this is actually something I've shifted my opinion on as well. I used to be very supportive of first past the post. We want a strong and stable government. And then I've realised, as I became more
strong and stable government, Reem. I've heard that somewhere before. Look, we've got to move on, so I've got to get to the news because there's some important stuff for us to tell you about the news. Reem Ibrahim, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you again soon. I'll be back after this. This is the 8 o'clock news.
We've been talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently are going to build it in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going round that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth at this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a 5 in a pot and you can go in and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the Parks Hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. And what about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner. Says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed Whack the Rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it the channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine a Scouser say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour ghost train.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Good morning on your Sunday. This is Russell Quirk. I'm in for Alex Phillips. It's just gone 8 o'clock. I'm here till 10. Then, of course, Peter Caldwell straight after me. Let us know what you think of the show so far. Call in, by all means. 0344 499 1000. Let me know what you think about the BBC. Are you happy with it? Actually, I have had a text from someone that thinks that they're good value. Dan from Kent says, I think the BBC are okay. Left-leaning, but people with common sense can look through that. Well, that's not the point. Actually, there's 2 points, Dan. One is that they're supposed to be impartial, and the other is that they are overseeing, encouraging, enabling scandal after scandal after scandal with zero accountability whatsoever. So let me know what you think about the BBC debacles, and that's plural, big S on the end, 0344 499 1000. And indeed, as we're going to talk about now, the migrant hotel issues, and again plural, whether it's sex tapes or whether it's criminality or it's epping, there's lots to talk about with regard to the boiling pots, I think you could say, that migrant hotels are. Let's speak to Ryan Saby. He's Deputy Political Editor at our friends at The Sun. Ryan, good morning and welcome. Sorry to get you up early.
Not at all, Russell. Good morning to you.
How you doing?
All good.
Good.
All
Well,
good. Lots of news today to discuss.
Well, you've had some scoops, I think. It's your scoop, isn't it? This OnlyFans migrant hotel taxpayer-funded set thing. Tell us about that.
That's right. Some of our news reporters have been dispatched all over the country to find out about what's really going on in some of these migrant hotels in recent weeks. And they've uncovered that there's been some well, I was about to say some action, but something going on in this Metropole hotel up in Blackpool, where it looks like some migrants have been involved in actually taking part in activities that have been recorded for OnlyFans. And when I sort of picked up on this this morning and last night, I was pretty shocked actually that not only could these people who are using taxpayers' money, hospitality to stay there and all the other benefits that they get, that they're actually taking advantage of the situation.
Well, literally, yeah, lots of advantage being taken by the sounds of it.
No, exactly. And to actually be so brazen to film it and then to put it onto OnlyFans to presumably try and earn some extra income.
But also, Ryan, to cough to it, apparently, was this brought to your attention at The Sun because of a whistleblower almost, a former employee that said that they were undertaking an inspection and walked in on this, should we call it this scene, which is, again, a taxpayer-funded hotel, the Metropole in Blackpool, a hotel that someone was saying earlier on, I think it was Mike Neville and also someone on text, they used to take their grandmother to for kind of high tea. Well, I don't think you want to take your grandmother there at the moment because it sounds like it's Caligula-like in terms of its propensity for filmed orgies, doesn't it? So I don't know where to start with this in terms of where our outrage should be. Is it the fact that they're doing this, the whole OnlyFans thing, and I guess, look, live and let live, or the fact that migrants think that they can come here and within a few days or weeks not only commit crime, which is a subject that we'll get onto in a second, Ryan, but blatantly set up an OnlyFans account. OnlyFans, by the way, let them set it up. They can then earn money out of it. But of course, the so-called set, the scenery, is a bedroom that is paid for by the taxpayer. I don't know where the outrage quite starts, really. This is, and it's almost becoming parody-like, don't you think? Whatever is going to happen next. I mean, are we going to find that, I don't know, an illegal migrant becomes the chief executive of Thames Water or something? I mean, seriously, this whole lunacy knows no bounds, does it?
Yeah, we heard in recent weeks of sort of migrants maybe signing up to Just Eat and sort of Uber Eats and working as delivery drivers, and it seemed like, if they have to get a job, that's maybe what they have to do.
But they're not allowed to work. They're not allowed to work.
Exactly, yeah. I mean,
because otherwise it's just yet another incentive, is it? So if it's not enough that they get a 4-star hotel room in the Metropole and a flat screen telly, well, yeah, and they're getting their 46 quid a week and they're getting dentistry and health and some councils, of course, as reform councillors have now exposed, spending up to £45,000 a year on McDonald's for migrants. That's Nottinghamshire County Council, by the way, and indeed Kent County Council exposing money being spent in the past by that council, so new councillors that have just been elected, on such things as driving and trampoline lessons. I mean, as if the incentives weren't stacking up enough in terms of accommodation and food and phones and so on and so on. they really are taking liberties with our gratitude, aren't they, these migrants? But again, I suspect, Ryan, nothing would be done about it. Do we know if there's been any consequences to this? I mean, do they immediately get deported from the country for breaching asylum seeker rules on working? I mean, do we know if that's happened?
I think in this case that we don't actually know, but two, I would have thought they probably wouldn't, because I think they're in the process of seeing their asylum case going through the system. It'd be interesting to see actually whether this is a breach of sort of one of those conditions or one of those rules, or if it's so strict enough that their case actually gets fast-tracked to see them see their case rise to the top of the pile. But
when you say fast-tracked, you mean it would take 3 years rather than 5 years? It reminds me also in the newspapers yesterday, I think, was the Albanian chap that is we're seeking to deport, but because he's in the middle of an asylum claim, we can't. And yet yesterday he decided to film himself in front of his brand new Mercedes with his private number plate on it, almost sticking his fingers up at us. Now, I'm not suggesting for a second that the money that he got for that car come from inappropriate or improper earnings, but we are seeing these stories, particularly in your newspaper, actually being revealed more and more and more, that not only are people coming here with their hand out, but they're biting the hand of Britain that feeds them too. There's got to be consequences.
Yeah, you'd have thought so. And I think one of the interesting things actually is the Reform Party, who have won several councils. And I think one thing that they are doing and that they will continue to do is actually to look at perhaps where some of this money or sort of taxpayers' money is actually going. So I think that they may try, and if there is any way of local councils finding out in those areas where this actual cash has been spent, I think they'll actually dig it up and try to expose it. But we come back to that Blackpool hotel. I've actually stayed in there myself, and I know that when I covered party conferences up in Blackpool a few years ago, that people were actually staying in that hotel. So it just goes to show that you had, effectively the great and the good staying in hotels like that in Blackpool, packed full of politicians and Labour Party delegates and the like.
And obviously, Ryan, we're not suggesting there's any link between politicians and pornography or sex scandals at all, because that obviously would never, ever happen. Can we move on now to another poll, a bombshell, I think you're calling it in The Sun today, which is that most Brits think that crime is out of control and don't trust the police or the government to keep them safe. I think we kind of knew this, didn't we? But this is confirmation. In fact, some of the stats in here, Ryan, actually, in terms of the crimes in particular that the British public are concerned about, this is actually pretty damning, isn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think where they think it's got out of control, in particular, is knife crime, and we're just hearing, continuously hear stories over and over again. And I think that actually that when you hear stories like that, it is so that such an emotional pull, because often it's around young children, young men who are caught up in this, and you just think that something could be done. Could there be more education in schools, youth groups, community centres, where people actually get, I wouldn't say brought up the right way, but certainly told about this. And this is the things that, could the police go into communities and actually talk to younger children a little bit more to try and...
But Ryan, do you really think that's the answer? No, the answer surely is more discipline, more police officers, police being tougher, more prison sentences, more prisons. I mean, that's the answer. It's not the fluffiness of just talking to kids and saying, hey, we'd rather you didn't carry knives. So you're, again, exclusive. You asked the public, the voting public, about 9 different crimes, and whether they thought as the public that those crimes were out of control in terms of those specific crimes. They were violent crime, knife crime, burglary, theft, drugs, vandalism, cybercrime, sex offences and gangs. 74% said knife crime is out of control. 60% said the same of violent crime. For theft, it was 70%. For drug-related crimes, 69%. And for burglary, 55%. So what we're saying here, and I don't know how big the sample was, Ryan, perhaps you can help us with that, but what we're saying here is that the majority of the British public believe that there's not just a crime problem, but actually, to use the words that were given to them to agree with or not, that crime is out of control. In other words, criminals don't see that there's any deterrent. There's no police on the streets, presumably as part of that. Less likely to get nicked, less likely to get a sentence. This is actually, I think it's fair to say, and I don't want to be too dramatic here, I think we've ended up in a place now in Britain where it's almost become dystopian. I mean, I think we're in a position now where I think we have to accept that the police and the government have lost control of Britain.
Yeah, I think this again. I think this starts on a low level. For example, you look at shoplifting. You know, people can just go into a shop and effectively take up to £200 of goods because they know they probably won't get punished. Now, the majority of law-abiding citizens won't do that, but there is obviously a very a cohort who will do that, and then they will perhaps go on from there and commit other crimes. But if people aren't being sanctioned or punished for that, what sort of message does that send out to the rest of society? I find it absolutely staggering. And antisocial behaviour, that sort of low-level crime where you know, may see graffiti on streets and
smash bus shelters and
all that kind of stuff. It just sort of, I think people see that and it actually amplifies how bad, how bad the problem is. And that's not before you get onto those more serious crimes. So that's why I think it is good to actually try and stamp out all this stuff at a local level before things actually escalate. But
it's the old broken window syndrome, isn't it? Rudy Giuliani, before he went a bit mad and under his the influence of Donald Trump, some would argue, when he was mayor of New York, one of the first things he did was to fix all the low-level stuff, all the low-hanging fruit, around fare dodging and literally broken windows and graffiti, on the basis that, look, if the place looks and feels bad and grimy and lawless, well then guess what? Criminals and everybody else are more likely to commit more crimes. Let's clean the thing up from the ground upwards and start actually solving the problem, but starting it with showing that we don't accept that we're going to allow society to kind of be degraded and downgraded. And I have to say, since having visited New York fairly recently, there are police officers, I kid you not, on just about every corner. And it won't be a surprise for listeners and viewers of this show to learn that London is now far, far worse in terms of crime than New York. Some of us remember in the 80s and 90s when New York was literally a no-go zone. Well, that's now not New York. That's London. Where are our politicians and their accountability here in terms of current government, previous government, and of course Sadiq Khan? We have to mention him, don't we? Because he's been the mayor of London for 9 years, and under his tenure, crime has increased and increased and increased. And even when someone gets stabbed outside a five-star hotel for their Rolex, as horrendously, tragically happened 2 weeks ago, you barely hear a peep from the mayor of London. I mean, does he care?
I'm sure Sadiq does actually care, and I think one of the problems is, and I think what we've seen with the situation around money when it comes to the police. We had Sir Mark Rowley, the head of the Metropolitan Police. We had several other police chiefs up and down the country demanding more money to actually.
It's not money, is it? It's not money, is it? It's organisational efficiency. I mean, I'll tell you, in Essex, right, there are 3,800 police officers in Essex now, the most ever. Yet, under the current Police and Fire and Crime Commissioner Roger Hurst, since he started his tenure in 2016, a lot of crimes, particularly around violence, sexual crime, drugs, rape in particular, have escalated and escalated since that time. Detection rates, by the way, with regard to rape, only 3% of rapes in Essex are now brought to account. That's got nothing to do with money and therefore police officers, because we do have more police officers on the street than we had 9 years ago, yet crime has escalated and detection rates have halved. So it really isn't about money, it's about will, it's about standards, and it's about operational efficiency. Maybe not having police officers sitting in police stations waiting for the phone to ring when there's an issue, rather having police officers on the street walking the beat. I mean, when was the last time you saw a police officer walking the beat in your county, your town, your village? Probably a long, long time ago, I would suspect, everybody. But having that deterrent, rather than it just being a kind of response service that might, if you're lucky, give you a crime reference number. That's what we need to do, right? It's not just about money.
Yeah, and I think on the sort of flip side of that, you then have the punishment and the deterrent side of things. And over recent months, and almost since this Labour government came in, they felt duty-bound to actually try and release prisoners early, because the prisons were full. And I think we can blame politicians of all stripes over recent years for not building enough prisons. Now, it seems like this government is trying to spend about £4 billion in trying to build prisons, but you can't build a prison overnight. And if you try and build a prison...
But Ryan, sorry, you say that. We seem to have accommodated 32,000 illegal migrants by way of them pretending to be asylum seekers very, very comfortably and easily at the likes of Wethersfield, the RAF base in Essex, which has got 800 asylum seekers there, various other hostels and hotels. We seem to have been able to accommodate 32,000 people that shouldn't be here, in my opinion, really quickly and easily. That's half the population of the prison population of Britain. So we can, again, with will, do the things that we should do, or maybe shouldn't have to when it comes to asylum seekers, yet we've spent the last 20 years moaning that there aren't enough prisons. Again, it just seems that there's no political motivation. You're right, whether it be the Conservatives or the current lot, it's easy to build prisons on the land of a country where only 9% of Britain is developed already. We could build hundreds of prisons if we wanted to.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think this is the trouble with planning and building and housing up and down the country. Once those applications go in, and if they're at the bottom of your street, my street, that there'd be complaints going left, right, and centre. It's the same with housing.
Well, look, Ryan, we've got a break there. Look, keep doing what you're doing. Everybody, go out and buy a copy of The Sun. Loads and loads of exclusive stuff in there. It might get your heckles up a little bit, but it's informative nonetheless. We're going to take a break. Back in 3 minutes. I'm Russell Quirk. This is Talk Breakfast.
Conservatives failed to do this in government, and that's why we're out of government, but Labour are far worse. So the Conservative Party, my party, has to really take this seriously and take a radical plan forward if we are to ever win back the confidence of the British people. But as you rightly said, Alex, the lawyers are already chasing this. I mean, potentially this is going to cost us huge sums of money, because the lawyers will now take it to the very end and try to squeeze as much money out of the system as they can.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
OK, welcome back. 8:21. I'm delighted to say we now have... shall I introduce this as a bun fight? It might not be a bun fight, it might be very cordial, but we have our head-to-head. I'm joined by Charlie Rowley, political commentator. Charlie, hello. And Adam Dale, who we've not met before, but I do know your dad.
You do.
Do you want to tell us who your dad is?
Jim Dale. He's got quite passionate opinions about things.
He has indeed. I think he says something about the climate every now and again.
He does.
Are you similar?
I agree with him on a lot of the climate things, as you would father to son.
Yeah.
I think most people are pretty entrenched in father to son ideology.
It rubs off, yeah. The apple rarely falls far from the tree.
But
or
we
whatever.
do have differences of opinion on some things.
OK, well, let's see. Well, look, this is all about you two now for the next few minutes. So let's see what you both make of the stories that I'm going to put to you. So let's talk first of all about this crime survey that The Sun have put out there, which makes for a pretty grim reading, Charlie, I think, in terms of the vast majority of the public polled say that not only is crime bad, I think most polls say that and have done for years and decades, but the fact that they say that they believe that crime is now out of control, particularly when it comes to sexual crime, violence, drugs, I mean, well, pretty much everything that affects us all the most on a day-to-day basis, how have we got to this place, I guess, is the question. And what are we now going to do about it? Do you think politicians will take any notice of this?
Well, those are two great questions. Will they take notice? They should. They'll try to do whatever they can, but...
What's the answer, Charlie? What do we do?
There's lots of answers, and the first is to make sure that you grow up in a society where there are laws and rules that everybody respects and abides by. A lot of that respect starts in school, which seems to have been lost. You can't go any day, it seems to me, without reading a story about a shop theft in a local store, or somebody having their mobile phone nicked or their bike nicked on the streets of London or any other major city.
50,000 phones stolen in London this year.
50,000, and not to mention a backlog of criminal court cases, not to mention the amount of people that might come into the country illegally, which is a crime in itself, and people that should be detained, should be deported. Not to mention the amount of prisoners that are released on these early release schemes that where people
and some not just early, but early
release, and people that are claimed would be absolutely no threat to the public turn out to be a threat to the public and are back in jail within a matter of weeks. So there's no wonder why those polls suggest the way that they do. What can you do about it? You've got to be tough on crime, got to be tough on the causes of crime. An age-old saying that goes back to...
Is it, as we were talking to Ryan from The Sun about just now, is it just a question of more money? I mean, is it another NHS-type dynamic, Adam, do you think, where we just need to throw another 100 billion at something
I think it's
to solve the problem?
Very difficult to start throwing money left, right and centre. I think that's something that's been an issue in this country for decades, really. It's throw money at the problem rather than reform the system. We're looking at what the government has said, which is about tackling the backlog in the Justice Department, in the justice systems, but you're also looking at a breaking point in prisons, and you can see why they're making decisions about early release. It's a very difficult decision to make, because obviously it's alarm bells ringing. As soon as you say people are coming out of prison early, well, why are they coming out of prison early?
And why haven't we built more prisons?
Well, I think that's an infrastructure problem that's been...
But it's not that difficult.
Labelled.
It's bricks and concrete and a bit of land, and there's loads of land in Britain.
Of course, but I think that's a failure of the last government, not necessarily this government.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree.
I think
plague on all their houses, for sure.
We're a year in, and I think...
but we can't keep using the same excuse, Adam.
But we can't keep trotting out the same headline. I think that's another thing.
True?
I've seen... They may well be true, and I'm not going to sit here and say that people's opinions in these polls aren't valid. I'm coming across in politics from a different angle nowadays. I just think people just don't listen to each other. So these polls clearly indicate that people are upset and are worried by what's happening, but at the same time we have to look at the reality of the situation, realise that we need to reform the system. We do need to build more prisons.
So how would you do that? What do you mean by reform the system?
Is in getting through that judicial backlog, which is one of the main issues we've got, which is people just in a waiting system constantly. We're only really dealing with the top level crimes, so we're not actually able to deal with...
But how does not having a waiting problem in the judiciary, how does that stop people committing crime? Because this isn't just a survey that shows that people are concerned about crime being out of control. The numbers also dictate, in terms of shoplifting, violence against the person, sexual offences, drug offences, those crimes over the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years have increased significantly. So this isn't just about the system, this is about a heavy hand of the policing and police being present, isn't it? I mean, maybe Nigel Farage is the answer. Maybe we need him as Prime Minister to come in with a bit of stick, as they used to say.
I think he's talking stick, but is there really any stick behind it? Because actually, to actually put yourself in that position to make the decisions, you've got to look at what decisions have to be made. And at the moment, with the prisons in breaking point, who do you want in? A murderer or someone that's stolen from a shop?
Well, I mean, neither of them would be good.
Yeah, both of them would be great. I actually think that we need to start turning maybe towards different formats in terms of prison systems, because at the moment all we're doing is we're locking people away, we're not rehabilitating them at all.
But Charlie, how about this for a solution? Do what they've just done in El Salvador, Adam will disagree with this, which is to round up all of the prolific criminals, all the murderers and the rapists that have been kind of variously let out, and bang them up for good. Guess what happened in that country when they did that?
Crime went down?
It plummeted, actually.
Plummeted.
It didn't just go down, it plummeted. That's the answer, isn't it?
To an extent, but we should have the places already for those kinds of people. But look, two things that have been drawn out of this conversation. You're absolutely right. The lack of infrastructure was a failure on the last government. Absolutely, tick, tick, tick. That's why they got kicked out. But we've got a new government in that could do something about it, but instead of building the prisons,
they're worse.
And
because they are letting people out early and putting people in for nasty tweets instead.
Exactly. And when you look at, and so the idea that just as a government taking a step back, the idea that you've allowed a two-tier system to be...
That's never going to get old.
It's never going to get. But that cuts through because that resonates with people, because people feel as though that they can't go out of their front door without, especially in London, without being mugged. And who runs London? It's a Labour mayor. And so, this really does matter, because when people are as exasperated as they are, and that's reflected in the polls, they won't be bothered about statistics, because the government will eventually at some point say whether they massage the numbers or not, whether you're a cynic or not, or whether crime actually does come down. If you don't feel it, then you're not going to vote for it. And so that's why people will turn to Nigel, potentially, because
Adam,
they want someone to do something about it.
The first role of government is to protect its citizens. And this government and the previous one and the previous one, they're simply not doing that, are they?
I'd say the previous one, definitely not.
But this one's a year in.
A year in's not a long time to change an entire system.
All they seem to do is release people from prison. Some of them by mistake, actually, but certainly, as we just rehearsed, early.
So I'm going to touch back on the point that I made, which was if you get the judicial system up and running properly, you'll get people punished properly. What you also need to do is have...
but we haven't got prison
I don't disagree that there should be hard...
And we haven't got police on the streets. I mean, I don't know if you've walked around London as I do, or Essex, you don't see the police.
But that's because of the cuts in the last... Austerity cuts from the last government.
No, it's not. In Essex, there are 3,800 police officers, more than ever. I walk a lot around London. I mean, I walked here this morning from Lower Thames Street. I walk around my town. I walk around London a lot. You don't see the police, even though in many areas there are more police than ever. So this isn't about
So is that not a failure of the police themselves?
Yeah, exactly. And who are the police controlled by? They're by politicians, like police and crime commissioners. So again, I'm trying to get to the rub of what we do about this, because I think, we're all wringing our hands and saying, oh, well, maybe we need to reform the justice system. Maybe we need to do this. Maybe we need more prisons.
I agree.
Just not, but and we can talk about broken homes and black kids without dads. We can do all that, right? That's easy to do. It doesn't fix the problem now. The only thing I would suggest that fixes the problem now is a heavier hand from a more prominent police presence. Simple as that.
I don't disagree.
Anyone disagree?
I don't disagree.
We've agreed, right? We can move on. Good. Okay. We're going to take a quick break while we get over that bombshell that, of course, I'm right. Shock horror. We're going to have a break. We'll be back in a minute where they're going to try and prove me wrong on something, I'm sure.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Adam Dale, the BBC is a faultless institution. Discuss.
It's a large institution, I can tell you that for nothing. Definitely not faultless. As with pretty much every large organisation, there's always bad apples, right? I come at this from the perspective of I'm actually not a big fan of the BBC myself, but I think you look at it from different perspectives. I think a lot of people on the right of politics think that the BBC is a big left-wing organisation, and I think people on the left of politics think that actually some of the presenters are a bit right-wing. So there's a little bit of is it actually doing the job it's meant to do, which is just be somewhere in the centre and kind of give out some opinions on both sides. And I get that the bad eggs have been found, but you're going to find that in every organisation, and just get rid of them and carry on is what I'd say.
Charlie?
Well, I'll meet you in the middle. I think anybody that thinks if you can't, if you don't wear a Palestinian badge to work, then you're right wing. So that's probably the emphasis
far
of the far right. Sorry, far right. If you're in the view of the BBC, the problem with the BBC is I like the BBC. I like its principles of being a broadcaster that informs, educates, and entertains. I like that bracket. I like Strictly Come Dancing.
And you think it's okay to be taxed in return for those things?
I think for those principles, yes. But I don't, because a lot of it goes to the education part of what the BBC should provide. Also regional radio and regional outlets, so people get local news, I think is important, rather than just having the national issues that we tend to talk about. But it's not just about the bad apples, it's about how you deal with them. And there have been cover-up there's been cover-up after cover-up.
Scandal after scandal.
Scandal after scandal. And the BBC just hasn't been able to get a grip on it. And that's why, even if you want to be pro the BBC, you've just got to look at the total, the common sense approach of all of the decisions that come across their desk. Is it right to air and I'm quite open about the conversation about Gaza and Palestine and Israel and the history and all the rest of it. But is it right to air a documentary where the journalist in question has got connections to Hamas? No, is the answer. So why
actually to pay that person who has connections to Hamas?
So why did it
from the public purse? That's the biggest
from
scandal.
the public purse. And then fast forward to Glastonbury. Kneecap and Bob Villan.
Yeah. Two of your favourites.
Two of my favourites.
You just named two of your playlists.
I know all the words.
so I'll answer me this. Let's see if you will agree or disagree on this. So Tim Davies, should he be fired? Yes or no, Charlie?
I like Tim Davie. I've met Tim Davie. The reason why I like him is because I think he's a bit sort of off the wall, and I think he's the only BBC Director General, and I've not met all of them, but the ones that I have met in the past, I thought he would have had the gumption to be able to take those tough decisions and fire people. The fact that he hasn't fired people, I think his time's up.
Do you think he's got to go? Adam, do you agree? If we had it in our power this morning.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because as the head of an organisation, you usually have to take the fall when things go wrong. So I don't disagree there. What I would say is, and you're right, on BBC, the educational pieces are usually very good and the entertainment pieces are pretty good. I think people would feel a real hole in the society if the BBC was suddenly even questioned to be...
Shouldn't he be fired just for continuing to air Mrs Brown's Boys? That's an offence on its own.
Yeah, I mean, I dislike Mrs Brown's Boys as well, but it's one of...
Anyone that likes it, by the way, 03444 499 1000 or text.
I'm sure
please.
you'll find people that do like it.
Really? I've never found one once.
There'll be someone somewhere, and that's the beauty of the BBC. It's quite a broad church, isn't it? Yeah. I think he's on the borderline of where he should be, and he needs to turn things around quite quickly if he wants to keep his role.
If heads haven't rolled after Glastonbury, then Tim Davies should go.
Yeah, no one's been fired.
But he should be sacking the people that... There were 400 staff, apparently.
But he should be firing people in order to save his own skin.
Exactly.
And the fact that he hasn't. But and the thing that keeps coming up today is that he's a nice bloke and we're all friends with him. I'm not sure that really should be a reason for keeping him in place. Talking of which, in terms of rogues, let's talk about water. And the water companies and Ofwat as well. So Ofwat are exposed today in terms of their management team earning £2 million between them on an annual salary basis. But of course we've had lots and lots of news, particularly this week, about the likes of Thames Water losing £1 billion. Thames Water now still paying their CEO vast sums of money. Obviously it's a private business that's funded actually through private equity, arguably not really delivering in terms of service given the billions of litres of water that leak out of various water companies' infrastructures on an annual basis. And of course now this thing that we're talking about today, which is that it's being proposed, I think, by government that those that are slightly better off, so maybe people in the southeast, should pay proportionally more for a litre of water than someone perhaps that's, I don't know, in somewhere more downtrodden, should we say, in Britain. So kind of water communism. Adam, what do you think about that? Are you for water communism or against water communism?
I like the way you phrased this question. Right, so I think water in general, I mean, it's a basic principle for people, right? It's a basic right. I think there's two elements to this. One, I don't think the water company should have been privatised in the first place, and I think that's the real failing, and I think to take them back into public ownership now is a real risk to the public finances just because of the poor state they're in. Now these chief executives and the top people at Thames, like Thames Water and the type of companies, they really should be giving back what they're taking. They're basically allowing people to have a failed system and being paid
Well,
out.
they're
for
earning
it.
big salaries, and of course the shareholders are taking dividends, which is why some of these companies are so highly geared in terms of money that they have now borrowed. And of course Thames Water, I think, have just posted losses of £1 billion. So Charlie, is the answer to nationalise?
I think it is.
Wow, you're supposed to be a conservative, you know that.
Well, I know, but I'm also.
You two, I think, did you two?
Oh, we're in the wrong seat.
Connect up. We connected this morning on the way and said, we just agree on everything.
But I think where we are just in general is just in general life and politics is that people don't necessarily vote left or right anymore. It's not about this. It's about what is pragmatic and what is the right thing to do. And I think the problem with this particular government is that it's banged on about creating GB energy, which, by the way, doesn't create any energy. Yeah. It's a new quango that they claim that they want to get rid of all the others. But anyway, it's an Ed Miliband white elephant, a hobby horse that's going to cost. So anyway, but I don't think any money should be going to that. I don't think any money, frankly, also should never have gone to nationalising the railways. There are always going to be problems with the rails. They're going to be late, they're going to be delayed. But actually, getting the connection between Network Rail and the train operators is something that needed fixing. But I don't think nationalisation was the right thing to do. An area where the government and the state should be stepping in to support things that really fundamentally goes wrong is water. The pollution that goes on in the southwest because of the bosses, the water companies, who have been let off the hook. Government didn't hold them to account. There wasn't the scrutiny there. They've really got us in a right mess.
Isn't the notion that civil servants are going to be able to run rail companies and water companies better than the private sector? That's for the birds. I mean, I accept completely that rail services have not exactly covered themselves in glory, but believe me, unfortunately I'm old enough to remember the days of British Rail and slam doors and curled up sandwiches.
I don't believe it.
No,
I don't believe it.
I think I remember. That's what it is. But it was awful. It was terrible the way that those organisations were run, and I suspect if everything's nationalised and it is at the behest of civil servants, we're going to go back to it. So maybe there's a middle ground here, chaps.
I think there's a real sticking point here, which is it doesn't really matter if it's public or private. It depends on the people that are running it. Now, you might argue that the people in the public sector will run it worse than the people in the private sector. At the moment, the water's
different types of people is what I would argue.
True, but at the moment, the private sector is running the water into the ground.
Yeah.
For want of a better phrase.
But then what we don't want is civil servants running it into the ground either.
Well, I think some public sectors are run well and some are run really poorly.
Can you name one?
Some elements of the NHS, some.
You think the NHS is run well?
I think it will be run well. I think it's always been run well under a Labour government compared to a Conservative government.
Well, they just consume more money, don't they? But there doesn't seem to be much accountability.
I mean, HS2 is the obvious one where that was obviously private company that has just spaffed money up the wall and then not be able to deliver.
Or the Dartford crossing, £200 million before they even got planning permission.
Exactly. So that's there is private companies that have totally failed. Where it comes to water, obviously the lack of infrastructure. The whole point of privatisation was for companies to be able to thrive and profit, but on investing those profits back into the infrastructure and making sure that we have.
But then
clean
maybe
waters.
that's the answer. There needs to be a mandate. If these companies are private, there needs to be a mandate in terms of a percentage of profits or revenue has to go back into infrastructure.
So how about pragmatically something along the lines of public ownership for a certain term until private ownership can be agreed with guideline stipulation?
Yeah, maybe, or joint public-private. So my solution, by the way, everybody, I won't bore you with it too much, to the housing crisis is that we have a publicly owned body, so in other words a board of people that are accountable to the public sector, but that run a housing corporation for the country in a private sector type way. So it's a kind of mishmash of public and private sector. Should we talk about migrant hotels? This has got to get you separated, hasn't it? Let's talk about Epping. First of all, let's not talk about the circumstances directly behind that, because obviously there's an individual that has been charged. So I don't want to talk about that specifically, but the disquiet at Epping and elsewhere, particularly in light of some figures that we've seen today in the newspapers, which show the extent of criminality by people that are in those migrant hotels. So, as I ruled off earlier on, out of 320, there are 320 asylum seekers that have committed various offences in the last 2 or 3 years around, rape, sexual offences, violent offences and so on. So it seems that there's a disproportionality in terms of the propensity for people in asylum hotels to commit crime, particularly those offences that are particularly heinous, like sexual crime. That is why we end up in a situation as we are in Epping. How have we got to this? And again, I'll ask you both. what is the solution? And let's also talk about what you think about what's happening in Epping and who's to blame, I guess. Adam, you go first.
I think in Epping, people are angry, right? And there's going to be, let's say, this inflamed idea that every single person in that hotel is suddenly a terrible person. The
That's
real
not right.
failing
Yeah, absolutely not right.
is the fact that we're cramming people into hotels and we're not dealing with the issue at hand. Now, the government's laid out its plan to get people out of hotels. Now, it's a very difficult decision to make because it's where do you put them next? Well, what do you do with these people once they're in the hotels? And I think people
they're going to put them in all the houses that Angela Rayner says we're going to build over the next 4 or 5 years, by the looks of it.
Well, if they go and build the houses and they put them into them, then what is that so bad a thing?
Yes, because there's 1 million people on the waiting list in Britain that have been on that waiting list for a long, long time.
So we need to get ahead of that list, don't we?
Well, it means that we need to therefore build 400,000 homes, which we've never done in Britain's history. Never going to happen.
It's an issue that hasn't been dealt with, so we're behind.
So do you think that the protesters, and they seem to be, in terms of the protesters concerned about what is happening in Epping, they seem to be peaceful. Do you think they are justified?
I am of the opinion that anyone that protests, as long as it's peaceful, there is no problem with it. Now, I don't like the idea that somehow we have these flag waving. I don't like it with the Palestinian protests either. I don't like this whole idea that we should be flag waving and
because it's polarising.
Yeah, because it's polarising. It puts people off. Everyone has the right to protest. Just do it peacefully.
What about the Opera House cast member yesterday that at the end of the show unveiled a Palestinian flag, albeit at the end of the show, and it had to be kind of almost wrestled to the ground to stop them doing such? I mean, that was...
People have very strong opinions on these kind of things, very strong. They're very emotive. And actually,
do you think that should be allowed to be done? Again, I'm all for free speech and protest, but forcing that Palestinian edict down the throats of the audience and the cast, I think is too far.
I don't necessarily disagree. I think people are going too far on both sides. Now, what I will say is that there's a lot of emotive opinions on both sides of this debate. I know we've somehow ended up back in the Palestinian conversation, but both sides of that debate, I mean, we're talking about two very polarising theologies, basically, in the Middle East. You're talking about quite an extreme Israeli government and Hamas.
Yeah.
Neither of them are good. Neither of them have got clean hands in this. They're both demonstrably attacking and infinitely cleansing each other.
So Charlie, let's get back to the migrant hotel thing, because there are 220 of these migrant hotels. They are becoming powder kegs, I would argue, in terms of there being issues that are perceived to be around the occupants of those hotels. We also now know that there is a link between immigration and criminality. We know that in terms of there are links between a propensity to commit crime and certain nations. That's just now a matter of fact. Again, so you presumably don't condemn and, in fact, probably support those in Epping right now that are protesting. Are they going to achieve anything? I mean, presumably not. So would you say, what's the point and you should all go home?
No, I wouldn't say that necessarily. I mean, Epping, am I right in thinking is part of Essex rather than London?
Metropolitan, it's where my mother was born.
Right.
My grandfather, by the way, had the Thaden pub, so be careful.
I know.
And I've got to say, don't upset Essex.
No.
Don't upset Essex, but yes, go on.
No, but where I was going to, because Essex were obviously denied county council elections last year.
How does that link, Charlie?
Because if there was, as you saw in other counties, Reform, I think, doing particularly well, who have obviously taken the mantle on this issue. That's why I think they've gained support. If you had an Essex County Council under a Reform leadership, let's say, who would be, I think, particularly or more tough on the issue of where migrants are allocated, whether it's in hotels in Essex or elsewhere. Of course, you're just shuffling people around. You've got to actually fix the problem. But the people of Epping might have benefited from a Reform Council. Who knows?
But Adam, I'm sure, would say they've got to go somewhere. Aren't you just pushing the problem to somewhere else? For there to be protests then...
This is NIMBYism, isn't it? It's everyone. No one wants it in their backyard.
No, of course. But the problem is to stop them in the first place, which we keep coming back to. It's a question of disincentivisation and physical barriers, whether it be the army on the beaches or whatever, and indeed a cessation of the incentives. I mean, Adam, I mean, you might be kind of verging towards the left, but we'll talk about this after the break, actually. But just hold this thought for a second. Should we disincentivise by taking away incentives for asylum seekers in terms of free accommodation, 46 quid a week, free NHS care and so on? Hold that thought. We're going to be back after this.
The Conservatives failed to do this in government, and that's why we're out of government, but Labour are far worse. So the Conservative Party, my party, has to really take this seriously and take a radical plan forward if we are to ever win back the confidence of the British people. But as you've rightly said, Alex, the lawyers are already chasing this. I mean, potentially this is going to cost us huge sums of money because the lawyers will now take it to the very end and try to squeeze as much money out of the system as they can.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I have some tongue-in-cheek breaking news. I had two, not one, but two messages of support for Mrs. Brown's Boys. Breaking news here at Talk Towers. Henry Slade says, nothing wrong with Mrs. Brown's Boys' early shows, but not sure what it's like now as I don't subscribe to the BBC. OK, there's kind of an irony there, isn't there? Yes, maybe the first one was OK just because you had to watch it to see how bad it was. And then somebody else that, funnily enough, has texted in anonymously says, I love Mrs. Brown's Boys, but not brave enough to say who you are. I don't blame you. Anyway, moving on from that. Yes, my question, Adam, was take away the incentives. That solves the problem. No more 46 quid a week, no more 4-star hotels, no more pizzas. You know, the Domino's branch at Dover is alleged to be the busiest Domino's in the country because it feeds the people that come off the boats with pizza. Should we stop the pizzas?
Stop the yeah. I mean, this is kind of we're verging onto quite dangerous ground, really, with the conversation because we're basically going to be talking about the ECHR, aren't we?
No, we're going to be talking about us protecting our borders and knowing who comes here.
We can't do those things. Not that I agree with doing all of those things, but we can't do those things without leaving the ECHR because there's an obligation to look after asylum seekers. I think that's the same throughout the world. If our country suddenly went to war and we were in the same state as Ukraine, would we not want to have asylum in other countries?
Charlie? In or out of the ECHR, and is coming out of it the solution?
Well, that's very
Don't be
good
on the
question.
fence.
That's
Don't be a
very
Kemi
good
Badenoch.
I think
we can't decide whether she wants to be in the ECHR or not. A year into being leader of the Conservative Party, shame on you, Kemi.
But my whole issue about is that we have the legal powers to do whatever we like.
Like Greece, like Poland.
We could deport, Rwanda could have worked. The Prime Minister could literally have said, get that plane off the tarmac now. And if anybody wants to have a legal argument about it, fine, we'll have it afterwards. We have got that power, we've got that control. But because of lawyers, there's this fear about, there's a good old saying, if you don't like the legal advice, get a better lawyer. But we are hell-bent of attaching ourselves to all of these rules and regulations. And, we know that the HCR has not worked in our favour because even now the Labour Home Secretary...
It just doesn't seem to apply to other European countries.
But the idea, you can't deport somebody because they're not a fan of their own chicken nuggets back home or whatever it is, or that they've committed a serious sexual offence in the UK.
So you're saying being in or out of the ECHR doesn't matter. We do have the ability to do what we need to do anyway, but then it becomes a matter of political will, doesn't it? Talking of politicians, let me read you this. This is something from this morning. Labour MP Tim Rocker, I'm just going to throw to this actually as a piece of video. Tim Rocker, who is a Labour MP, says this.
We can't look like the alternative version of the transphobes. No. Because the best argument against them is a conversation with them. Yes. Because they look swivel-eyed and honestly, they're not very well people, I don't think, the ones that I've met.
So that is the MP for Macclesfield saying very, very recently, as the Telegraph are outlining today, that he thinks that transphobes, as he puts it, are swivel-eyed and not very well people. That's not a very inclusive thing to say. He's not being very equitable, Adam, is he?
It's obviously his experience of speaking to people. Maybe it's a bit, what's the word, strong, but I mean...
Swivel-eyed. Who last said that?
Well, yes.
David Cameron
Quite right,
of
yes,
UKIPers.
yes.
So it seems to have gone full circle on the in the political spectrum, doesn't it? So it's now no longer.
I do
UKIP.
think it's a strong way of saying what he wants to say, but I think his point is basically it's not getting through to some people, and some people. He's not wrong in saying you do need to have these conversations with
No, but
people.
what he's effectively saying is, if you do not believe that a man can become a woman, that you're a swivel-eyed loon and you're not very well. Well, that includes me then, because I don't think a man can be a woman. Do you?
I have quite a straightforward opinion on this, right?
Go on.
So there are men and there are women medically, right?
Chromosomes, biologically,
Yes.
yeah.
I don't really care what you choose to be after that. I really don't. As long
But
as you're
what
not-
about if they
There's-
impose it
there's-
on other people?
I don't think many people are. How many trans people do you know?
Well, I do know men dressed as women that have gone into girls' changing rooms and exposed themselves. And bearing in mind, I'm a father of 3 teenage daughters.
Of course.
I do know that my daughter was bounced out of a paddle tournament a few weeks ago because she was playing a female game against a man dressed as a woman. So it has consequences. So I agree, a man can be a chicken. A woman can be a hedgehog, as far as I'm concerned, but not if you impose such ridiculousness on me. Charlie, what do you think?
Well, there's no doubt that there will be transphobes out there. There'll be transphobic people, there'll be racist people, there'll be bigots,
But
there'll
hang
be
on,
sexist...
guys.
But
Is it transphobic to say that a man can't be a woman? That's not transphobic. That's just biologically factual.
And that's the point. So this particular MP, I don't know who he's talking to. He's clearly talking to the wrong people, because he's clearly not
An
talking
audience of Labour supporters.
An audience of Labour supporters, and he's clearly not talking to women who fundamentally want their same-sex spaces. They want single-sex spaces for their own safety, for their own protection. He might be, I've no doubt, referring to someone who has got more skill in their left little finger, like J.K. Rowling, compared to that MP, who clearly won't listen to her.
He's probably talking about all of the Reform MPs. He does say some things that are very, very... I would support, actually, and very, very true and correct. He said Parliament is a toxic cesspit, Adam, and that other MPs are motivated by fear, envy and greed. Well, he's 100% right, isn't he?
I think in most senses of the word. I think most people agree that at the moment there's a little bit of toxicity from public towards any government. I do think what's happening, though, across the whole globe is that it's becoming almost impossible to be an incumbent government. You are hounded by the press at every turn. I think the 24-hour news and the idea that every decision you make is under a microscope.
It might just be because they're bad decisions.
Yeah, but what, is every single country making bad decisions? Is every single person making bad decisions?
I think the calibre of our politicians in this country, certainly, and maybe to an extent in other countries, although I think it's changing in Europe, I think the standard of politicians and politics has dropped and diluted significantly. Yeah, and again, I'm old enough to remember good old-fashioned politicians. You'll like all of these, by the way, Adam, the ones I'm going to reel off now. The likes of Margaret Thatcher and...
Controversial.
Yes, and Norman Tebbit, bless him, R.I.P. a couple of weeks ago.
What about Clement Attlee?
Clement Attlee, I'm not that old, mate. Thank you very much indeed. Don't ask Adam back. OK, so let's move on from that then. What else do you want to talk about? Anything you want to raise in particular? Do you want to talk about Britain's toughest shopkeeper? This chap, have you seen this?
No.
This is talking about crime. This is the individual that owns a shop. Let me just get the details up. And has taken it into his own hands. He runs the Core convenience store in Newton Hall, Durham. Andrew Bald, aged 39, has basically said he's had enough of people coming in and shoplifting and not being chastised, not being brought to task by the police or the judiciary, back to our point we were making earlier on. And he says after 6 years of running the store, he's been robbed blind, I'm not having it anymore. So he's now physically tackling shoplifters. Do we agree with that, Charlie? Should shopkeepers, and again, we're not inciting anything here, but do we blame shopkeepers for taking the law into their own hands?
No, we shouldn't. You should never put yourself in harm's way, and you should always make sure that even if you're in any kind of store, I would imagine, and you're seeing blatant theft by some youths, oiks of today who are petty teenagers, but if you happen to be a 6'7" rugby tackler week in, week out, and you feel as though that you can tackle these you antisocial yobs, then I would support you, and I think the great British public would be behind you all the way, Adam, in that ruck, that scrum of taking down.
Proportionality, of course, prevails. And Adam, what do you think of this? So Andrew, in the past, has chased suspects around the whole estate upon which his shop sits, and recently dragged a man who swiped a crate of Fosters back into the shop.
He performed a citizen's arrest. Police turned up. They did actually arrest the thief. Wow, OK, that's a start. But then spared him prosecution and handed out a community resolution instead. Again, I think we're back to the beginning of this conversation.
back to the prisons.
That isn't good enough, is it? Because guess what that shoplifter then goes and does? He thinks...
He does it again, yeah.
I'll do it again.
I get it.
That's not working, is it?
The punishment's not there. I guess what we need to look at, and I don't disagree. I think he should have... It's private property, right? His shop is private property. If he can't defend what is his, then as long as he's doing it proportionally. I mean, if he comes out with a hammer and starts hammering someone in, then that's wrong.
But performing a citizen's arrest, I mean, on the basis...
reason they're allowed to citizen's arrest. Yeah. I don't disagree with that.
It has to be with justification, and certainly it seems that he's justified. But I don't know what's worse here, the fact he's had to do that. And OK, the police can't be in every shop on every street at all times. I totally accept that. But the frustration here is that even if the police clearly did turn up, the judiciary, to your point actually earlier on, Adam, are lacklustre to say the least in terms of the way... In fact, this looks like it was a police decision rather than a judiciary decision. Right, chaps, I think we're out of time. I think you're going now. You can go and enjoy your day. I don't know what the weather's like out there because they've closed the bind. But
we're about to go and rugby tackle some youth.
Yes, you're going to go on shoplifting
somewhere,
patrol.
I'm sure.
Yes, but again, proportionally and nicely, of course. Right, after the news at 9, I'll be back with Simon Dansook, former Labour MP. That should be interesting. Chaps, thank you very much indeed.
You.
Back after this.
We've been talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently going to build it in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going around that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth for this theme park. So what I'll do, mate, I'll shove a £5 in a pot and you can go and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed. Very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the Parks Hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. What about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner. Says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed whack the rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
There's loads of dinghies. Call it the channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine the Scouts to say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour ghost train.
Yeah.
Where
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm Russell Quirk in for Alex Phillips. I'm here for another hour, then handing over to Peter Cardwell. Thanks for your participation so far. We will get to some more calls later on. Lots and lots of texts. Don't bother sending me any more about Mrs. Brown's Boys, OK? The two of you, and there are only two in this country that like Mrs. Brown's Boys, you have made your point. But let me read you some others. Tim Rocker is off his rocker, says Gary Bolden, based on the piece that we just outlined with regard to him as a Labour MP saying that anybody that doesn't believe effectively that men can be women and women can be men is therefore a transphobe and by definition a swivel-eyed loon and is not well. Well, Darrell says, good morning, the Labour MP is talking to swivel-eyed loons who are not very well. That's who. I don't quite know what you mean by that. And Graham says, I can sum up every story that you've raised this morning into 3 words, and that is actions have consequences. Get that sorted and everything will get better. OK, well, yes, a bit of discipline, higher standards, blah, blah. Good old-fashioned conservatism with a small c. I have to say, not with a big C, because, in my view, the Conservative Party with a big C have rather lost their way. They are glorified Liberal Democrats, which is probably why we are where we are. But anyway, talking of politics, politicians and so on, let's talk to Simon Danchuk now, who's a former Labour MP. And Simon, good morning. Thanks for joining me.
Good morning. It's good to be with you, Russell.
Yeah, good to see you, mate. And talking of you being a former Labour MP, you couldn't be any further away from this current Labour government politically or morally now if you tried, could you?
No, you're exactly right. And I was just listening to you talk about Tim Rocker there, the Labour MP who's been going on about trans rights and everything else. I mean, the Labour Party has been transformed, if that's the right word, from what it used to be when I first joined it many, many years ago, probably 35 years ago. I mean, it used to stand up for, it used to stand against illegal immigration. It used to stand against benefit cheats. It used to be strong on crime and strong on the causes of crime, if you remember Tony Blair.
And how far back are we going? I mean, we're going back pre-Blair, are we?
Well, we probably, we certainly are. When I joined, it was well before Tony Blair was leader. I remember seeing Michael Foot speak in Burnley many, many years ago. So I've been around the Labour Party for a long time, but it's changed radically. I mean, it's just not the Labour Party that we used to know, and it doesn't stand up for the values of hard-working people. I mean, that's the reality of it.
And so do you think a lot of us, Simon, have stood still in terms of, our political beliefs stay static? I mean, mine certainly have. Yours, by the sounds of it, have over the last 30 or 40 years. But these political parties have moved away from us. So we haven't left them. They've left us.
Yes, that's exactly the case. And so Labour has effectively been infiltrated by people like Tim Rocker. I mean, he would never have been listened to or even certainly wouldn't have become a Labour member of Parliament once upon a time.
He sounds like a Liberal Democrat.
Yeah, exactly. The Labour Party is controlled by this sort of middle-class public sector, modern trade union elite. North London Labour, I call it, just for the for ease of sort of comment. But it's not the real Labour Party that I once knew. And in northern, that's why the northern towns and northern people in particular, hard-working people across the country, in actual fact, have been completely abandoning Labour.
And do we think, and Simon, sorry to interrupt, do you think that that's why they're marching into the arms of Nigel Farage on reform?
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to make the point. The hard-working British people have gone. First, they went to Boris, didn't they? And now they go, in 2019. And now, after the Conservative failure, they're now going very much towards reform into Nigel Farage. People have had enough of these two parties who are clearly not doing what the British public want.
Let's talk about these migrant hotels. And I'll say this to you. You're a man, if you don't mind me saying, that's married to an immigrant, as I am. My wife's from Slovakia. Your wife is from Rwanda. How do you feel about what's happening in particular in Epping right now in terms of the disquiet around the Bell Hotel? So we talked about it a bit over the last 3 hours, but I'd like to get your take on it in terms of, I guess, first of all, if you think that the population of Epping are justified in being there protesting, bearing in mind from what I can see, the vast majority, if not all of those protesters, those concerned Epping residents, are peaceful and are not committing crime. The aggravation, as it was a couple of days ago, would seem to have been accentuated by the arrival of some masked refugees welcome, stop the far right, Antifa types. And again, there's a big question mark over whether the police encouraged such a meeting of those individuals and indeed may, and I say may, have actually escorted them from Epping Station to the centre of those protests. So Two questions. You have sympathy, I would presume, for the people of Epping protesting? And secondly, if it's true that the police did encourage those two groups of rival protesters to meet, what on earth is their motive, Simon?
Yeah, well, in answer to your first question, yes, I very much support the residents of Epping in terms of protesting about these issues, and I think we will see much more of that as the year goes on and in future years, because people are absolutely furious, rightly so, about the illegal immigration that's coming into this country. I mean, it's absolutely appalling, and we are having the mickey taken out of us. That's the polite phrase to describe what's going on in terms of illegal immigration. So I'm in full support of the protests that are taking place. It is interesting in terms of your second question about the police role in this, and I've seen the videos where they appear to be busing some of the anti-protesters, to coin a phrase, in and out of the area. I'm very suspicious of what role the police is playing in all of this. I'm not comfortable with all these anti-protesters wearing masks and parading down the street and being escorted by the police. It's as though they wanted to set up some trouble.
And why haven't the police? I mean, so I think there's a big question mark over whether the police have indeed ferried those counter-protesters from Epping Station to the process. I think it's very clear from videos, and I asked on X yesterday for evidence, and I got lots and lots of people sending me messages of videos showing those counter-protesters being put in vans peacefully, by the way, as buses, as taxis, effectively. Not that they were charged with anything, they weren't certainly under arrest, but being taken away from the protest. Now, I can understand the police doing that operation, I suppose, if they felt that there was going to be trouble. But to do it the other way around and to bust them in would be curious and odd, to say the least. But also the masks question, Simon, I think is one that needs asking. So we've just heard that the Notting Hill Carnival, which should be banned, by the way, in my opinion, because of the criminality there, so that takes place in the next couple of weeks, there's going to be facial recognition cameras deployed by the authorities to ensure that bad people, troublemakers, are rooted out of the crowd. Why then does the next door police force, Essex Police, allow and in fact encourage a load of people that are actually chanting? I saw video yesterday actually of one of those masked left-wing types, one of the counter-protesters, feigning a gun action at some of the other protesters. The police allowed that to happen. I would say that that is criminal, or certainly verging on criminal. Why are the police, again, operating in this kind of two-tier approach where in some scenarios, so for instance in St George's parades in London that we've seen over the last year or two, there's been an edict given by the police under certain powers that people may not be masked. When it comes to the Notting Hill Carnival, people may not be masked. Yet when there's police, buses and Antifa thugs turning up in Epping, the police walk past and escort those individuals, knowing and allowing them to wear masks. What the hell is going on there?
Yeah, it's that phrase you use, it's two-tier policing. There's no doubt about it. In Britain, we have double standards in terms of policing. We've seen it in relation to the pro-Palestine protests, which have completely got out of hand in recent times. We've seen it in relation to these Epping protests, where the anti-protesters are allowed to wear masks. Essex Police need to come out and give a very clear, thorough statement in terms of how they approach the whole protest and what sort of policing they used and what they thought were appropriate. And there should be Essex MPs that are really shouting about this. I mean, this is happening on their doorstep. If this had happened in Rochdale when I was the MP for Rochdale, I'd have been shouting from the rooftops in terms of what was going on in relation to Greater Manchester Police and how were they policing it.
Yeah.
And politicians have to ask these questions. And if you live in Epping and your MP isn't asking questions about this, you will want to know why.
Well, certainly the neighbouring MP, so my MP for Brentwood and Ongar, which borders Epping, is Alex Burghardt, and I did send him, in fact, a public message on Twitter on, I think it was Thursday night, and he did respond to say, because I said, Alex, you need to raise questions here in terms of where there's trouble, because there was trouble, of course. We saw police vans being battered and windscreens being smashed and so on. We need to not allow the media to jump to the conclusion that that was a far-right contingent, because it could well be, and it did look as though it was an organised left-wing contingent that were there to cause trouble, no doubt as a kind of false flag type approach so that the so-called far right get blamed. And Alex, in fairness, did respond to say that he would do that. And in fairness to him, he has been quite good in the past at coming back to me. But I don't have lots and lots of hope, particularly when it comes to Essex Police. This is the police force, don't forget, where crime, of course, has risen significantly and detection rates have been slashed in recent years, but also the police force that seems to spend much more of its time knocking on the doors of journalists like Alison Pearson to ask her not to say nasty things about people.
Well, this is part of the problem. People, because of the two-tier policing that we've seen, and there's lots of examples of it, people have lost faith in the police. And it's very much down to the leadership of the police, really. I mean, it's
well, the police and crime commissioners, presumably, because they're the ones that hold the pen when it comes to policy and budget.
Yeah, absolutely, and they've decided to focus on non-crime incidents, non-hate crime incidents, whatever they call. You know, why are we even policing that stuff? It's as though they're going for the easy policing.
Well, the clue is in the non-crime bit, I think.
Well, exactly. Why bother doing it? You know, they should be scrapped immediately. But some of this stuff, it happened, and you pointed out the Conservative Party much earlier on. This happened, was implemented by a Conservative government. Why were they implementing policies like that anyway? I think it was Theresa May, who was the Home Secretary. Get police policing. And, you know, there's a survey today in the Sun newspaper. People have completely lost faith in the police being able to tackle crime.
Yeah, we talked about this earlier on, Simon. I mean, worse than that, this is the majority of the public that were polled saying that they believe that crime in Britain is not just bad, but it's out of control. We're also out of time, I'm afraid, Simon. So until next time, look forward to seeing you or meeting up with you again soon. Thanks for your contribution. That's Simon Danchuk. We are going to go to the phones because we've had lots and lots of calls. Let's go to Melanie in Cardiff. Melanie, how are you doing this morning? Thank you for calling.
Hi, I'm doing fine, thank you very much.
Good.
I'd just like to bring up, I agree with what was just said, totally. But I'd just like to bring up the point about this scandal in the BBC. And I think people need to remember what the BBC did to a very good and moral man called Cliff Richard. All those years ago. I mean, the police were complicit in that as well.
Well, just describe, Melanie, what happened. I mean, I remember, but just for the benefit of those perhaps that don't remember.
Yeah, sure. Cliff Richard obviously was abroad at the time. They raided his home, looking for the evidence, the allegations that were made against him. And of course, he was cleared of this as well. And for some reason, the police let the BBC know. I mean, they must have let the BBC know. How would they have...
Well, because they put a helicopter up to film it.
Yeah, exactly. You know, this was a good and moral man who's lived, quite a good life. I mean, not saying he's perfect, but he's lived a good life.
Yeah, no, but what do you think about the BBC more generally, Melanie? Do you think it's served its purpose? Do you think it's had its day? Should we just let it curl up and die in the corner and replace it with something that's more fit for purpose and maybe by way of some subscription payment rather than being taxed and being forced to pay for such dire tripe?
Well, I can tell you now that I have just stopped paying my television licence, and the reason being, for the last at least 3 years, maybe 4, the BBC has had nothing that I'm interested in. I'm a 70-year-old heterosexual Christian woman, and there is nothing on the BBC, including Songs of Praise, that has anything to do with the way I live.
And Melanie, have you stopped watching it on the basis of you're making a stand? So do you still have, and I don't want to get you into trouble here, but do you still have a television and you just, by protest, you've stopped paying, or you've thrown your television out the window and therefore you don't watch it because you can't, because you don't have a TV set?
Well, more and more at the moment, we're not watching it, and we're watching stuff online and watching programmes like Talk for our news information.
As you should.
And GB News as well.
No, I've never heard of it. Talk is the only place that you need to rest your eyes and ears, Melanie. And just because you've mentioned Arrive, I'm going to cut you off now and go to... I'm joking. No, thank you very much indeed for your call. I'm kidding. Let's speak to Miranda in Cumbria. Melanie, thank you very much indeed. Miranda, in Cumbria, what a lovely part of the world.
It is. It's beautiful. But I wanted to talk about Epping and what happened there. I am concerned that there wasn't a woman on the panel when you had your head-to-head, or a mother. And I do think that there were genuine concerns, and I do, like you, believe that Antifa arrived and it was deliberately to incite. But what really concerns me is who told them and how did they mobilise so quickly when this peaceful demonstration to go and deliberately incite? That's what it seems like to me.
And who do you think, sorry, look, let me just address the first point. I mean, obviously, there's only two people on the panel and me. It just so happened that it was Charlie and Adam. Maybe you can be on next time. I mean, look, we don't have a preference. Sometimes it's two women, sometimes it's two men. So yeah, and obviously, we don't want to be... Do you know what? This is not a station that should be governed by over political correctness. I think things are done on merit, but yeah. So believe me, we don't engineer it so it's only two men on the panel.
No, I completely agree, but I do think the left wing side sort of almost dismiss the concerns, and there are certain places in Wakefield where there is an asylum seeker hotel, and
but the left always do that, Miranda.
Where there are no-go areas for women,
yeah,
and it's really important to children. I don't think a lot of men, I mean, obviously you have daughters from what you've said previously, and there is a big concern. And my friend who used to go for a walk in that area on an evening, she doesn't feel able to go out for a nice summer evening walk by herself. And I think...
Wait, sorry, is this in Cumbria? Because I would imagine that Cumbria is unaffected by such things.
No,
I mean, in the cities, I mean, what's your nearest city? I don't know. Manchester, Liverpool?
You've got Barrow-Furness and you've got Lancaster and places like that. However, I am aware in Wakefield of a certain situation there. And I think a lot of men at times, especially if you don't have children, don't seem to be able to empathise maybe with women.
But Miranda, but the reason that there are so many people, men and women, outside the Bell Hotel in Epping right now is because of their concern for their wives, daughters, mothers and grandmothers. I mean, that's why there's now this protest. And again, there'll be further protests tonight. And again, I will urge personally and on behalf of Talk that those protests should be peaceful so that your voice is heard. But so I think it's exactly because we're worried about how our women are being treated that there are those protests.
Yes, and I think, I mean, I don't know how many police mobilised so quickly to be there and attend. And as my father said years ago, he said, the problem with the police is that as soon as, I mean, my father's old, so he said, one of the policemen who he said, the problem with the police is when they had the panda car introduced. Usually, when there was a policeman walking, they could usually hear screams and be able to try and help in a situation. Now, when they're driving about in their cars, they don't even hear what's going on. And you do think that they've lost their priorities, basically.
But the issue is that I don't think you generally see them driving around as a deterrent. You certainly don't see them, yes, you're right, walking the beat, which I think in towns and cities they absolutely should be doing. The police might say operationally, or that's it's not very productive, but it makes the public feel better. And of course, if you are a criminal and you believe that a police officer or two could walk round the corner quietly, as you say, at any moment, then you're much less likely to commit crime. It's obvious to me.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think with regard to the asylum seeker hotels, I think the people like Keir Starmer, Lord Hermer, etc., they don't have the huge hotel at the end of the street. And they don't have the concerns about their children. They probably have a house in the country. They have a period of care within London where they attend, but their families really aren't affected by what's going on. And I think if they attended places like Wakefield, Dewsbury, Bradford, and they went just to look about, and even in Barrow-Furness, and you look about and you see how the demographic has changed, I think they might feel a little bit more empathy.
So they need to be more in touch, right? I mean, look, I'll tell you how Keir Starmer thinks about Britain's communities. After the Southport murders, as they were, he turned up for 30 seconds and turned on his heels and walked away again. That's what he thinks about communities like that. It was more a photo call than a visit.
Just terrible. I mean, like, I did read an article in the 1980s where a judge, he was representing a terrorist hate preacher, and essentially even the judge got the mettle of him and basically said that his arguments were fallacious. And I think that you can't really trust him. He can't really empathise. He doesn't understand. I don't know whether he just has a
Miranda, I think you're describing politicians generally. I think on all sides of the aisle. I think they are brought up through university and then through either Labour or Conservative central office as bag carriers and spads and so on. I heard a statistic yesterday, actually. I think only one member of the Labour front bench, only one member of the cabinet right now has had a job in the private sector. One member. I think there's 34 people in the cabinet. That is an absolutely shocking and disgraceful statistic. Miranda, thank you very much indeed. Don't disagree with anything. Sorry about the panel. We'll try harder. We'll have, yes, 17 women next time. I'll be back after the break.
So far this year, hundreds have appeared in court charged with criminal offences including rape, robbery and grievous bodily harm. This investigation basically reveals that 1 in every 100 hotel migrants has been hauled before the magistrates in the first 6 months of this year. That is 339 cases.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm Russell Quirk in for Alex Phillips. She will be back, of course, I would imagine. I think she's back on Monday, actually, covering for, so tomorrow for Julia. But in the hot seat for another 34 minutes or so. Let's turn to all things royal, shall we? Because, yes, we need to talk about the problem that is Prince Harry, once again, and also this apparent liaison, this mending of fences with his father, King Charles. So to talk us through this, Charlotte Griffiths joins me now, editor-at-large for The Mail on Sunday. Welcome. Thanks for your time this morning, Charlotte. Talk to us about this secret peace summit and why we should care.
Well, you should care because this time last week I broke the story on the front page of The Mail on Sunday.
Wow. Congratulations.
And, the reason I was so shocked when I first found out that they were going to have this peace summit, on the outside, it might just look like a cup of coffee and a drink. But, these are two parties, Prince Harry and his Sussex team and the King's chief of communications, Tobin Andre, had not spoken in years. The King is not speaking to his son. He really embarrassed his father by going on to the BBC a few weeks ago, doing an interview saying, I've lost touch with my father and I don't even know how long he has left to live. This was hugely, hugely embarrassing for the King. So obviously what had happened is they decided, look, we've got to get together and start communicating again. And, stage one is communication. And the aim is, it possibly will take a couple of years, but the aim is stage 10 will be, actually having these two men in a room together again. And what Harry really wants to do is get the royal family at his Invictus Games in 2027. So I think he's got a 2-year plan. And last week was stage 1 of that 2-year plan.
And Charlotte, why would he want to do that? That just sounds like he wants to do it for the publicity of having his father at the Invictus Games.
I think that plays a part. You know, imagine if he does this Invictus Games, it's his big passion project, and not a single royal family member turns up in Birmingham, in his home country. It would be so embarrassing, and all the publicity would be taken away from Invictus and towards the royal saga. So I think you're completely right, that definitely plays a part. But I also think, genuinely, there is a part of Harry who is starting to realise, oh God, what have I done? You know, you know, his father has got cancer and he's not communicating with him at all. And so beneath all the...
But Charlotte, whose fault is that?
Oh, for sure
it's not King Charles, is it? I mean, you know, I'm not the biggest fan of King Charles in terms of his woke edicts around, you know, I don't know, powering his car on cheese and, you know, worrying about the climate crisis while flying around the world, and indeed believing that we shouldn't have any borders, which I think is something that Charles said fairly recently. But the man seems to be overall a good man. Harry, of course, does not seem to be a good man when it comes to morals and ethics, and particularly the way that he's treated his family. It's a bit rich for Harry to go back cap in hand now, isn't it? And to say to the family, oh, actually, I don't know how old he is, Harry, but I'm in my 40s now, and it's taken a while for the penny to drop, but I realise I might have destroyed the relationship I got with my father, and he might be dead soon. I mean, that's his own fault, Harry, isn't it?
I think most of the blame lies with Harry. I think you're right. I will, if I was to defend Harry, which I don't often do, by the way, I'm not in the habit of doing this, I would say, boy, has he had a seriously messed up life. I mean, his dad and his mum would go
Haven't
on
we
to
all? No, hang on, sorry, Charlotte. Hang on a second. We've all had mishaps and issues and so on. It's not an excuse for trashing your family publicly to the point that Harry now can't be trusted. I think that's the issue here, isn't it? How does Charles trust his son not to badmouth him in the future, not to use the content of any conversation in a book or a Netflix documentary? Notwithstanding the fact that his mother died, tragic as that was, he's not the only person that's had family tragedy. Now, I don't think that's an excuse for him to be so bitter and twisted towards his family, frankly.
Yeah, but did your parents go on national television when you were a child and badmouth each other in interviews with Panorama and the BBC and David Dimbleby and Richard Dimbleby? I mean...
I think that affects you when you're 15 or 16. It doesn't affect you when you're 40.
Well, something happened, because you're right. He did go on to trash his family. He's clearly full of rage and anger. He can't contain it. He spills it out to Oprah. Something must have happened in his childhood. I mean, I'm sure we can guess many factors. But you're right, in terms of the trust, there is no trust. And that was the whole point of this peace summit. That's why the summit wasn't between Harry and Charles. It was between Harry's aides and Charles's aides, because they were hoping that they could build some trust, because they can't get King Charles and Harry in a room, because Harry will leak whatever his father says. And of course, you know, what happened with that meeting is it did eventually come out, which has caused a furore, and probably put them back a step or two. But I would say that the lines of communication are still open. You know, the King hasn't now shut the door after that peace summit came out.
Well, let's see how it plays out. But notwithstanding the circumstances around Charles' health, I totally understand that. But some would say that perhaps there's just been too much water under the bridge. Harry has had too many chances. And look at his relationship with his brother. I suspect that is completely irreparable. So I guess time will tell. But I wouldn't blame Charles and the rest of them, not just for being bitter and angry and disappointed at Harry and Meghan's behaviour, but also the fact that I would argue that a lot of what they've done has not just been because they've got a chip on their shoulder or because Harry's had a traumatic upbringing. It's been for money.
Yeah, that's a very, very depressing part of this whole story.
But it's true, isn't it? It's true.
Is that those facts speak for themselves. The Netflix shows that he did, which weren't about his family, the Polo one was number 3,000 and something in the charts. Meghan's As Ever was number 385 in the Netflix charts. When he badmouths his family and does the Meghan and Harry love story, our path to freedom, blah blah blah, all those kind of storylines, they go to the top of the charts. And the fact is that they accepted that and they took the money. So there is no doubt about that. But in terms of water under the bridge, I think possibly what Charles is doing is for his own sanity and his own peace of mind as he approaches, let's face it, the last decade or so of his life. You know, let's hope that he has that long. Maybe he's trying to find some inner peace. We know he's a very circumspect man. He's a very philosophical man. He's deeply religious and spiritual. Maybe he's trying to bring some closure around it for his own cancer battle and his own cancer journey. So, you know, I'd allow it for that reason.
I think we all agree, or would all perceive, that the bigger person in the room, not that he or Harry were in the room as you outlined, is King Charles. Talk to us a bit more about this. The show that you just mentioned, Meghan Markle's show, only making, or it didn't even crack Netflix top 300. Was this the cooking show? Is this the Love Meghan thing, or is this something else?
Yeah, this is With Love Meghan.
With Love Meghan. Yeah.
Brand is called As Ever. I always get them mixed up. So she has gone around telling everyone that Series 2 has already been commissioned, and hasn't she done so well? Well, actually, Series 2 was filmed at the same time as Series 1, so they have to release it. Otherwise, what's the point of putting it in the bin?
Wow.
So I think this is a false narrative that she's spinning out. And
did you watch any of it, Charlotte?
I have to say, it's my actual job to watch it. And I still
Hang on, are you saying you only watch it because you have to?
But I only got to episode 3. I couldn't force myself, even for my career, to watch episode 4, 5, and 6. But I have to say, it was very entertaining. When she admonished her friend, Mindy Kaling, saying, "I'm Sussex now," and the fact that she allowed that through the edit, my jaw hit the floor, because she's obviously got no self-awareness. She thought that was an acceptable thing to put in the cookery show. It made her look 10 times worse.
And the fact that she thinks that everybody watching this guff will think it's real. Charlotte, thank you very much indeed. Let's see how this plays out insofar as the reconciliation, if there is one, between Prince Harry and King Charles. Honestly, I hope for the sake of, on the human side of things, something happens, but frankly, I think I'm over it in terms of that particular relationship. Let's go to take a break, and I'll be back in 2 or 3 minutes with more of this, and in particular, anti-Semitism on the streets of London. Let's talk about that. This is Talk Breakfast. I'm Russell Quirk, back after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Yeah, Russell Quirk in for Alex Phillips. I'm here just for another 25 minutes or so. Then I'll be handing over to Peter Cardwell, who will be taking you through till 1 o'clock. Let's talk about, the propensity for these Palestinian protests on the streets of London to continue. The fact that there has now been some regulation, government at last has done something about some of these groups and individuals with regard to Palestine Action now being designated as a proscribed terrorist organisation, but it hasn't stopped lots of these protesters and in some respects agitators going along and let's just say being rather disparaging about Jews and Israel. More than 100 arrests made in recent days as pro-Palestinian protesters chant such things as "F your Jewish state" at the tops of their voices, and arrested they should be. Well, look, let's talk about this some more with Jake Wallace-Simons, who's author of Israelophobia, the newest version of the oldest hatred, and what to do about it. And he's also a columnist for The Telegraph. Jake, welcome to Talk Breakfast.
Good morning.
Good morning. Two things. Let's talk about this in terms of the arrests and the protests. But you may have seen also in the news today the fact that a cast member at the Royal Opera House yesterday saw fit at the end of a performance to unfurl a Palestinian flag in front of the cast and the audience members, and had to be kind of grappled with to stop them standing there unfurling it as some kind of statement. What do you feel about that? Right to freedom of speech, right to protest, or a bridge too far?
I think that, unfortunately, what we're seeing is the result of a lot of brainwashing that's happened, in particular, since October the 7th. These people live in a world in which a real-life genocide is going on in Gaza, in their view, akin to the Holocaust or the Rwandan genocide. That's obviously untrue, but that's what they believe. And they believe that Britain is complicit in that, again, untrue. But if you really believe those things with all your heart, then you're going to want to do everything you can to disrupt it, and that's what we're seeing at the Royal Opera House. I mean, look, free speech obviously has to be protected, but the problem that we're seeing now is that this is an issue which has just snowballed ever since October the 7th without the government really getting to grips with it. Right in the beginning, the Palestine protests were organised by people who had over past links to Hamas. I reported on it myself. These people, some of the organisers, had been pictured with Hamas leaders in Gaza before. And so the police really had an opportunity to do something about it then and make sure that the protests took place, but not in a way, in the way that we've seen. And yet that opportunity was missed. We then saw quite soft policing taking place week after week on our streets, allowing these people this atmosphere of permissiveness, while the far-right protests were really clamped down upon hard. We saw the police running over somebody just a couple of days ago in a far-right protest. And that's really led us to where we are today, where you've got this legislation passed latterly to control Palestine action, and it's really the police are trying to arrest a lot of people, which is almost unfeasible for them. But you get the sense that it's really, too little, too late.
Yeah, let me just pick you up on the far-right protest thing that you just outlined, just for the sake of balance. Yeah, this was in Epping, and I don't think there's any evidence it was a far-right protester that was run over by the police. But I take the point. Do we think then that some of these naive individuals that just want to have a cause, it's a kind of student politics, isn't it? Do you think that they see, well, first of all, they're ignorant in terms of not really knowing the first thing about the conflict, and indeed, Hamas, and the fact that, of course, it is a terrorist organisation as prescribed for good reason. Do you almost think that they interchange the Palestinian flag and their support for Hamas? I mean, they almost you almost think that they're displaying the Palestinian flag to somehow surreptitiously advance the fact that they support Hamas. Do we think there's a bit of that going on?
I think, to be honest, it's more confused than that in their mind. They haven't got that level of clarity. I mean, on the Epping thing, you're absolutely right. I used far right in the way that the media has used it, but I didn't mean to disparage them across the board. But yeah, I think there's a lot of confusion in the minds of these Palestine protesters. I don't think they really know what they think. A lot of them famously can't name which river and which sea they're talking about in their chants. For them, it's not really about the reality. It's more about an expression of their own politics at home. It's an anti-establishment move. It's a left-wing, it's a radical left position, really, that's taken the Palestinian cause as a totem that it can get behind and a flag that it can rally behind. It could have been climate change. It could have been the trans...
So to the point then, so it's almost a Greta Thunberg type thing. Yes, if it's not climate change, it's it's Palestine and Gaza, but it could be anything else. So it's just agitation. I mean, it's anarchic.
Yeah, they're against the West. They're against the West. It's this.
Why do they live here then? Why do they live here, Jake?
Why they live? Well, you tell me.
I don't understand. If you're against the West, fine. Well, we'll just stay as we are. Thank you very much. Well, why didn't you nip off somewhere else where it's not to the West then and protest there?
Well, that's the deep irony of it. They're using the freedoms they've got in the West to protest against the West. And, you know, there was a Palestine activist just the other day recording herself saying she was looking forward to the collapse of the West. I mean, quite what she thinks she's going to be able to do if that were to occur, she wouldn't be able to protest at all. Certainly not wearing the clothes she was wearing.
So, Jake, do you think that what she wants is the regime that she ran away from to take over in the West? That would seem pretty stupid.
No, she was British. That's the thing.
Oh, I see.
A lot of these protesters are, you know, white British people who've been brought up in this country, radicalised by the education system, radicalised by the university system, radicalised by social media, and have come to turn upon the very freedoms that they enjoy to express themselves in the streets week after week.
And happy to be arrested by the looks of it. More than 100 arrests over the last couple of days. And they probably don't understand what the likes of Palestine Action and Hamas being prescribed as a terrorist organisation. In other words, they advocate terrorism on, individuals, citizens, the innocent, and by being seen to chant such things as "from the river to the sea" and "F your Jewish state" and so on, it is tantamount to supporting those organisations, and they shouldn't really be surprised that they're dealt with at last, I have to say, by the British authorities. I mean, quite what happens to them when they are arrested, they're probably released around the corner, frankly, but it's about time. But I don't know why they are surprised that being in league with such a vile edict would result in incarceration, or as it should do.
I think it's because they don't see the jihadis for what they are. And what they're doing is misinterpreting these jihadi fanatics. We've seen them not just in Israel and Gaza, but also in Syria just over the last week. The same sort of methodology against the Druze minority there. Beheadings, mutilations, killings of children, shoving people out of balconies to their deaths, summary executions. That's how jihadis work, whether it's in Syria, in Gaza, in Iraq with the Islamic State, or even in the Bataclan in Paris or on our own streets in Manchester. But they're misinterpreting that. They're seeing that as brave freedom fighters that they're getting behind who are anti-colonialist. It's totally wrong, and that's getting them into all sorts of moral problems, and now they feel they're the victims when the police are coming for them.
Yeah, the one that amuses me, I have to say, is the Pride for Palestine group, where they're advocating, the freedom of homosexuality in a Palestinian context. Someone needs to tell them what happens to homosexuals in some Muslim countries, in some Muslim situations, whereby they're thrown off the tops of buildings. The irony. What about anti-Semitism in schools, Jake? I don't know if you've seen this in the newspapers today. A number of teachers surveyed that are Jewish, and the majority, 51% of those teachers, have said that they have received anti-Semitism in the way of aggression, chants, insults from school children. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, the school system is just another institution that's dominant these days. And a lot of it as well is fed into by the media, which has been reporting the Israel-Hamas war in an extremely biased way that demonises Israel while often writing Hamas out of the script entirely. Yeah. And all of this is leading to kids being subjected to this brainwashing at school. But often it's the teachers as well as the kids that are turning on the Jews in their midst with this grotesque anti-Semitism.
Although here, 25% of those teachers that were polled that said that they, as Jewish teachers, had received anti-Semitism were too scared to speak up about it. So the fear that is being invoked upon the Jewish teaching community, very, very clear to see there. What do you think happens to those children in the corridors of secondary schools across Britain that shout, from the river to the sea to their Jewish geography teacher? What do we think happens to them?
Well, nothing, as far as I can tell.
What do you think should happen to them?
Well, I mean, the problem is that we're looking at a cultural decay that's taking place not just in schools but throughout society. And so when you try to legislate against it, as we've seen on the streets with the legislation against Palestine Action, you start to take measures against people, arrest them in the streets or discipline them in the schools, but it's going against the dominant cultural feeling, and particularly on the left, which is that actually it's the right thing to do to support Palestine and to abuse Jews. And so, yes, of course these kids should be reprimanded, should be expelled, but the problem is that the teachers are at it as well, and they're acting in this culture of permissiveness in schools. And so the problem is much deeper than simply taking action against them.
Yeah. OK, Jake Wallace-Simons, thank you very much indeed for appearing on Talk Breakfast. Until next time, we're going to take a break now. When we come back, James Essis, I'm told, who's a psychotherapist and founder of Just Therapy, is going to be joining me. I think it's the producers have called him in to give me some therapy, it seems. Let's see how that goes, shall we? Many have tried, many have failed, I can tell you that. 9:46, I'm Russell Quirk, back after this.
And I said, well done to the BBC, because they know they're going to get this
For
backlash.
removing a man's career, you think that's okay?
Look.
His
I said,
ability to earn a living, Kev.
No, not at all. He will bounce back in other guys. Yeah, this is just one aspect of his overall empire that he's got, and I've got every confidence that he will bounce back. Listen, we've got to hold ourselves responsible for some of our actions. I've had to do the same thing. I've had to step down from being in a position of responsibility because I acted inappropriately. I lost my temper.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Last 10 minutes of the show. Peter Cardwell will be in a second. We'll be having a little chat with him in the run-up to his show from 10 o'clock. Earlier on, though, I mentioned this Tim Rocker character, who's the Labour MP for Macclesfield, who we have on video, thanks to our next guest, actually, talking about transphobes in a rather disparaging way. Let's introduce you to James Esses, then, who's a psychotherapist and founder of Just Therapy. James, you've been instrumental in this particular story that we're talking about today. Just tell us how you've been involved with this.
Morning, Russell. Yes, I've woken up being particularly swivel-eyed today, actually. I was sent a link to this venue, to this event. It's called Queering Academia at the University of Westminster. I saw that Tim Roker was on the bill, along with various other academics from across the country. I thought, that looks interesting. Let's see what's going on behind closed doors. And so I sent somebody undercover with a covert camera, and this is what they discovered.
Let's show what you found.
What we can't be is we can't look like the alternative version of the transphobes, because the best argument against them is a conversation with them.
Yes.
Because they look swivel-eyed and honestly, they're not very well people. I don't think the ones that I've met.
So I think, James, if I get this right, this is Tim Rocker, a member of His Majesty's Parliament, effectively saying that you are a transphobe if you believe that men can't be women and women can't be men. And as a consequence of that, you are also, therefore, a swivel-eyed loon, inverted commas, reminiscent of what David Cameron called UKIPers all those years ago, and that such people that do not believe that men can be women and women can be men are not very well people. Have I got that right?
Unfortunately, you do. And in the therapy world, this is what we call projection. Because Tim Rocker himself has essentially gone on this unhinged rant. He uses the term transphobe, but of course we know that the context these days is that refers to anyone who believes in biological reality. So he's essentially insulting the vast majority of the British public. But he goes on to try and undermine the recent Supreme Court judgment. He attacks the current chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission. Essentially, anyone who disagrees with his worldview is dangerous or unwell. And yes, this is a member of Parliament for the Labour Party. And, I've said, and I truly believe this, I think this is probably representative of the average views of a Labour MP. I don't think Tim is particularly unique in his viewpoint.
Do you think it's their view, or the view they want to project, to use your word, on the electorate because they believe that that will ensure their electoral popularity? I mean, bearing in mind only about 0.5% of Britain identify as trans.
Well, in the history of this movement, there's been a hell of a lot of virtue signalling. So I do think there's an element of that. But then in terms of the current, feeling and tone in society, I think this is electoral suicide, because the vast majority of the British public are against gender ideology, the harm that it's caused to women, to children and free speech. So I think he genuinely believes this. I mean, he makes a big song and dance about the fact that he was the first gay MP for Macclesfield. And he regularly in this talk references our community. community. He speaks on behalf of the entirety of the gay community as if he is some sort of acolyte.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt. Do you think that he's more the kind of Labour MP for Pride than he is the Labour MP for Macclesfield?
Well, this is what I'm hearing. Since I put out this clip, I've had a lot of his constituents reach out to me and say that they've got in contact with him for all manner of local issues and that he simply never responds. But on this issue, he seems to be pretty hot. So he does seem to favour certain topics over others. But, he doesn't represent the gay community in the United Kingdom. There's been a huge outpouring of anger from many of those from LGB backgrounds and movements who completely abhor what he is putting across. But, this is what goes on behind closed doors, and it is painful to have to send people undercover and to have to trudge through hours of this nonsense, but people need to see what is going on when people like Tim think that they're speaking amongst friends with no one else watching.
Well, and whatever happened to kind of harmony and not promoting division? I mean, surely the language that he's using here, and I know he disagrees with anybody that feels that, there's no such thing as distinct chromosomes, as in the biological difference in chromosomes between men and women. I know he believes that. But yeah, I mean, it seems incredible to me that, that he will kind of trumpet this stuff, and I guess, as I say, he certainly believes he means it. I don't imagine that the people of Macclesfield, though, are particularly woke, are they? So I'm not sure he's playing to the crowd in terms of his future electoral security, really.
No, he's not at all. But again, he didn't expect that this was going to be broadcast all over the internet. He was at a queering academia conference amongst supposedly like-minded people. So, but no.
And have you had any stick? Have you had any negative feedback on social media? I mean, we know what a cesspit X can be. Have you had negative feedback on your exposure? Bearing in mind, you've only exposed the truth, the facts, and the things that he's actually said.
I haven't actually. I've put out a lot of these in the past and I received a hell of a lot more pushback in the past as well. I think society really is beginning to wake up to the madness of this, and they do not want their elected members of parliament pushing ideology and speaking disparagingly about the vast majority of the country. People are sick and tired of it.
I think when it comes to MPs, we want them to legislate, we want them to protect us, we want them to do the right thing by way of crime and the economy and so on. But it seems that Tim Rocker, rather than from what you're saying in terms of not responding to his constituents, is more concerned about being a one-man campaigning machine for trans rights. I'm sure that that's probably not why Macclesfield decided to elect him.
No, indeed. And I've seen emails he sent out to constituents recently in which he seems to be supporting re-engaging puberty blockers for children as well. I'm trying to do a little bit more digging on this as well. So he's pushing this stuff left, right and centre. But, Keir Starmer has suspended MPs from the party for a lot less recently. So it will be interesting to see what action, if any, Starmer takes off the back of this. I imagine he won't do a damn thing, but I certainly hope he does, out of consistency at the very least.
So he goes as far as to promote puberty blockers. Some would say that that's child abuse.
But that's precisely what it is. I mean, children have been irreversibly harmed and left sterilised off the back of this. But again, this is all part of this LGBTQ plus worldview and mentality. It's really quite concerning. But, I imagine if you polled in private most Labour MPs, I'd say they agree with Tim.
Well, or to my point, I think they say they agree with him, but they think that they are playing to a crowd that is more likely to elect them if they are, what's the word, progressive. That's the word, isn't it?
Well, that's certainly how they want to be seen. But, in my eyes and my fellow swivel-eyed lunatics across the country, it is utterly regressive, actually. It's the exact opposite of what they claim to be.
Yeah, I think Tim Rocker might want to couch his language somewhat in the future. I don't think we should have parliamentarians being so divisive, no matter what they think. And of course, he's absolutely got a right to his opinion. He's absolutely right to be entitled to that. But to use such insulting language for people that simply believe in biology as people being swivel-eyed and not very well, that is not the language that I think we should expect from a parliamentarian. OK, well, look, thank you very much indeed. James Esses, psychotherapist and founder of Just Therapy, very, very sensible. I didn't get much therapy there myself, but maybe I'll get some from Peter Caldwell in a second.
James is such a great guest, isn't he? He just knows so many things. He's so wise.
I just love sensible guests. Yes. You're a closet lefty, apparently, Peter Caldwell.
Yes, that's right.
You were outed yesterday.
It's so far in the closet, it's in Narnia.
What was that all about?
Well, listen, you and I both know, Russell, we get all sorts of interesting texts and tweets to our... but no, I just thought it was worth retweeting.
Well, I did like it.
It was quite funny. It's very, very far back in the closet.
I think my comment also was, yes, why are we not surprised? Anyway, no, you're not. You're very, very sensible. What are you talking about today, mate?
Lots of things. The King Charles, fascinating story in the Sunday Times about the fact that he's very exacting. 11 out of his 12 gardeners have left in the last 3 years, but that's a sort of a talking point. But much more interesting is the main question we're asking today, which is how do we trust the police again? I don't know if you've seen this huge, fascinating story in the Sun.
You've been talking about
You've
it.
been talking about that. Well, lawless Britain. 48.8% of people think Britain is becoming a lawless country.
But I think what we need to understand from this is not just yet another crime survey that says, yeah, we think crime's a bit of a problem. The question asked here that the majority of people contend with and agree with is that we believe as a society, by way of the majority from that survey response, that actually we have lost control.
Yes, lost control.
Yeah. I mean, it's even worse than crime being bad.
Yes.
We now believe as a public that the police and the authorities, for whatever reason, have actually lost control of our streets.
And I'll be asking the Cabinet Minister, Steve Reid, about that a little bit later on. I'll also be talking to Kevin Hollingreich, who's the Shadow Housing Secretary for the Conservatives. We'll be talking about water bills as well. Could water bills go up because of the changes the government's going to be putting
and the fact
in?
that Ofwat, their hierarchy apparently